Chapter 661, 1 month later, seeking monthly ticket recommendation. The extraordinary experience of that night did not cause any noticeable stir among the other students at Hogwarts. Life continued as usual, with everyone adhering to their regular routines of study and leisure. Even Anduin maintained his usual demeanor, showing no signs of change in his interactions with the students. He remained the strict instructor they had always known. However, for Harry and his friends, the events of that night had opened up a new world. Eager to share their experiences, they recounted the night's adventures to the twins and other close companions. George and Fred, much like Ron, were thrilled at the prospect of owning legendary items. Upon hearing about the hundreds of pieces of equipment Anduin had shown them, they were ecstatic. The twins, driven by curiosity and excitement, decided to follow Ron's lead. They snuck out to the dock in the middle of the night, hoping to catch a glimpse of Anduin's collection. But Anduin was not as lenient with them. He caught them and made them do over 100 push-ups before sending them away. Despite their failed attempt and the subsequent punishment, they confirmed the existence of the tactical club from Anduin himself. Soon, rumors began to spread throughout Hogwarts. Some claimed that being selected by Anduin for the tactical club meant receiving a legendary item immediately. Others believed that members of the tactical club were exempt from the grueling training sessions. Of course, there were skeptics who dismissed the rumors as false. Only Harry and his friends knew the truth. Since that night, the group had been training diligently. Starting from the second week of tactical training, the freshmen began learning the delayed training method and other basic exercises, just as Hermione had predicted. Anduin also opened Training Room Number 1 for everyone to use freely. Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione took the initiative to practice together every afternoon after their classes. Neville became the group's physical fitness coach, often leading them in endurance and reaction exercises in the exercise room. In addition to their morning runs, they also ran a lap in the evening and used the equipment in the exercise room. Though exhausting, they found the training enjoyable. Hermione took charge of teaching spells within the group. Besides the levitation spell that Anduin had assigned, they also learned simple spells like unlocking, repairing, and illumination spells from her. Harry showed a natural talent for magic, often mastering spells quickly. Ron followed closely behind, while Neville struggled a bit more. However, Hermione was patient, always helping Neville correct his mistakes and practice until he was proficient. The daily practice of the delayed training method gradually improved their spellcasting abilities. Although the initial training was painful, after a week of rigorous practice, they began to notice their progress. They could feel the flow of magic more clearly, and casting spells became smoother and easier. This sense of growth and empowerment was addictive, motivating them to continue their efforts, aside from the allure of legendary items. In addition to their self-training, Harry and his friends gradually became more acquainted with Leona, especially Neville, who sincerely sent 2 boxes of Moonlight Toffee the next day, which made Leona very happy. This gesture earned him her favor. At the same time, Leona seemed to follow Anduin's suggestion and began to appear more frequently in Hogwarts Castle. This new ghost quickly attracted the attention of many students. Especially after a while, once everyone knew she was associated with Anduin, many tried to contact her, perhaps hoping to use her to get closer to him. However, they soon found themselves overwhelmed by Leona's difficult personality. The ghost captain's favorite pastime was cornering people and making them praise her. If you behaved well, you might earn a wink or a pat on the head for encouragement. But if you annoyed her, you would quickly learn how terrifying it is to provoke a woman with a bad temper. Leona, like Peeves, could interact with physical objects, and the saber she wore around her waist was not just for show. Quite a few students got beaten up for saying the wrong thing, and they discovered that complaining to Anduin about Leona was futile. In fact, Anduin would use these incidents as teaching material for his wound treatment course, and as negative examples in his fighting class. According to Anduin, if you couldn't even handle a ghost, you were only making yourself look foolish. In less than 2 weeks, Leona became the ghost that everyone at Hogwarts least wanted to encounter. second only to Peeves. But Leona seemed to enjoy her new role. She liked to wander around the castle when she had nothing to do, striking up conversations with any lone student she encountered, much to everyone's annoyance. As a month passed, both Harry and the other freshmen, as well as the older students, began to realize the benefits of tactical training. At the beginning of the school year, everyone was exhausted from the daily morning exercises. It seemed like everyone at Hogwarts looked like they were on the verge of collapse. But after a month, the students had adapted and could complete the full set of morning exercises without suffering from fatigue. Their overall mental outlook had greatly improved. Additionally, this month was enough time for Anduin to spread the delay training method throughout the school, allowing everyone to train adequately. While the morning exercises were primarily for physical fitness, the training method directly enhanced their wizarding abilities by increasing their sensitivity to magic. As they got used to the intensity of the training, everyone noticed positive changes in their attention, energy, and posture. These positive changes were not only beneficial to the young wizards, but also to the professors. They observed that the students were absorbing knowledge faster, their memories were stronger, and they could concentrate better in class. The progress in learning magic had also accelerated. Although the professors had been informed by Anduin about the training method before the school year started, they did not expect the results to be so significant. In just a month, the little wizards had transformed. Initially, many at the school were skeptical about the training method, but due to the support of Dumbledore and the 4 house heads, they kept their doubts to themselves. As the benefits became apparent, the professors gradually recognized the value of Anduin's tactical training, as it indirectly supported all other disciplines. Time quickly approached October 31st, the eve of Halloween. After finishing their extra training in the afternoon, Harry and his small group of 4 had just changed their clothes and hurried down the tower, eager to attend the Halloween dinner in the Great Hall. At that moment, the Weasley twins jumped to the side of the group, one on the left and one on the right. "Have you heard? The school invited singer Celestina Warbeck as a guest performer for this year's Halloween dinner." George blurted out excitedly as soon as he appeared. Fred quickly added, "It's said that Professor Wilson pulled some strings. She seems to be a signed singer with Silver Flash Company, and all her recent records have been released by them." "Stina Warbeck? Who is that?" Hermione, who had just entered the wizarding world, looked at the twins blankly. If it was a famous wizard from a history book, she might have recognized the name, but the name the twins mentioned was too foreign to her. She is a British wizard singer who is very famous throughout the entire European wizarding world. Ron interjected, looking at the twins with wide eyes. "Are you serious? My mother used to stand by the magic radio every day, waiting for her music program. She was the first to buy her records when they were released." "It's absolutely true," Fred said, patting his chest. "We overheard this news from Professor McGonagall. They've prepared a grand banquet this year. We're in for a treat, but why do you all look so glum?" As Fred mentioned, the 4 of them, Harry, Hermione, Ron, and another Harry, wore sad expressions, not smiling at all. "Aren't you nervous at all?" Harry asked the twins, looking at them strangely. "After Halloween, Professor Wilson will select members for the tactical club. We're all worried about it." "That can't be the reason you're not enjoying the festival." George shrugged indifferently. "You've worked so hard during this period. You'll definitely be selected." "That's not certain," Hermione said, clearly the most anxious of the group. "Now the whole school knows about the club. Everyone else is our direct competition." Ron nodded in agreement and then glared at the twins. "It's all your fault. You spread the news everywhere. Didn't you see the exercise room was packed after class? It's not our fault. Who was the first to brag in the common room? It seems to be you, right? Do you expect everyone to keep their mouths shut?" George retorted, giving Ron a dissatisfied look. End of this chapter. Chapter 662. Are you sure this is not an exercise? That's right. I think your worries are unnecessary. This is the club that Brother Anduin has created. How could we be missing? Fred reassured everyone nonchalantly. The professor is very strict, so he definitely won't show favoritism. Hermione insisted firmly. You don't think you can always be lazy, do you? How is that possible? Fred and I go to the shooting range and the court to practice every day. Now, the two of us can consistently hit a moving target from 30 meters away, and we are also very familiar with parrying medium-speed magic bullets, George explained. He wasn't lying. He and Fred had been working hard during this period. They even practiced until late every day, disregarding school rules. Their lively nature often turned their training into duels, which served as an alternative form of practice. Harry and the others were non-committal about what the twins said, still worried about their own situation. After a month, Harry's entire demeanor had changed significantly. He was no longer in the sickly state he had been before, though he still wasn't particularly strong. Neville looked the same, mainly because he had received training before the school year started. The basic physical training after the start of school had little effect on him, but his spellcasting ability had improved a lot. He no longer struggled with chanting spells as he used to. Ron and Hermione had been average in various qualities, but now they had shown some growth. However, the biggest problem was that they couldn't see how much they had improved. The attributes and levels in the system would only change after a physical examination, so everyone always felt a sense of uncertainty. As the group entered the auditorium, they immediately felt a strong festive atmosphere. Hundreds of bats were flying around the hall, and dozens of huge jack-o'-lanterns floated about. These lamps were not ordinary. They were all magical lamps produced by Silver Flash Trading Company. A row of musical instruments had been arranged at the front of the auditorium, operated by skeletons dressed in grand formal attire, looking serious despite their eerie appearance. Harry and the others were infected by the lively scene as soon as they entered and couldn't help but smile. No wonder the twins were looking forward to the Halloween dinner so much. It truly lived up to its reputation. However, Snape, seated at the faculty table, still had his usual gloomy expression. He even curled his lips in dissatisfaction at Anduin beside him. You must have made a lot of money bringing so many alchemy items into Hogwarts. I didn't expect you to turn the school into your business. You really wronged me, Anduin replied in a good mood. I sponsored those magic lamps and musical instruments for free. If you like them, I can give you one after the dinner. I don't want these annoying things, Snape dismissed, swatting away a jack-o'-lantern that grinned at him. These alchemy props were like a bunch of annoying children, always gathering around to make faces at people. That would be a pity. These new magic jack-o'-lanterns are selling well during Halloween, and they are limited. Many people want to buy them but can't get them, Anduin said, watching the pumpkin lanterns circle around Snape like flies, finding it quite amusing. Can you keep these ghostly things away from me? Snape glared. Anduin irritably thought it was the other party's fault that these broken lights became so annoying. They thought you were going to play with them. These lights like to stick to noisy people. If you ignore them for a while, they will fall apart, Anduin advised seriously, hiding his prank. In such an atmosphere of jubilation, the Halloween dinner at Hogwarts officially kicked off. Dumbledore had spared no expense for tonight's dinner, with all the ingredients being magical animal meat. The little wizards, naturally, were not polite at this time and were dazzled by the food. At the same time, the special guest Celestina Beck, invited by Anduin, also appeared. After collaborating with Anduin's Silver Flash Company, the famous witch singer's career began to take off. She was already a renowned singer in the UK, but Anduin's magic phonograph and records helped her singing reach the entire wizarding world. Now, she was a hot star in every major wizarding community in Europe. Besides Celestina Warbeck, Silver Flash had also discovered several potential wizard singers, such as the mixed-race vampire singer Loken Dace. However, in terms of popularity, Celestina Warbeck was unmatched. While enjoying the festive atmosphere, Anduin casually chatted with Snape. I heard you still like to make things difficult for Gryffindor students. Aren't you afraid of being hated for being so biased? Snape gave him an annoyed look. What does my potions class have to do with you? Don't forget you came out of Slytherin. If I were you, I would spend more time taking care of my own house. I don't like to use the house to determine who is my own, Anduin replied with a teasing smile. You must know that the person in charge of sorting is just a hat, and his vision can sometimes make mistakes. Like you? Flitwick always thought you should belong to Ravenclaw, Snape said, glancing vaguely at someone at the Gryffindor table. You probably care about my class because of some people. Anduin knew Snape was referring to Harry. That's Lily's child. Don't they have almost the same eyes? But his face is as disgusting as his annoying father. Snape curled his lips in displeasure and stuffed a large piece of steak into his mouth as if to vent his anger. Seeing Snape like this, Anduin shook his head helplessly. When a person has both likable and disliked parts, it's not surprising they would become as entangled as he was. Just as the banquet was progressing normally, the door of the auditorium was suddenly knocked open, and the loud sound even interrupted Celestina Warbeck's singing. There's a troll in the basement. A 12-foot troll has broken into the castle. Professor Quirrell staggered into the hall with a terrified expression, hurriedly informing everyone before collapsing on the ground. What? The little wizards immediately became a mess, and many little witches screamed in bewilderment. Silence! Don't panic! Dumbledore, who was sitting on the staff bench, immediately stood up and shouted loudly. His magically enhanced voice quickly calmed everyone down. But after warning everyone, Dumbledore did not make further arrangements. Instead, he looked at Anduin with a strange expression. In fact, it wasn't just him. The entire teaching staff shifted their eyes to Anduin. This strange sight baffled the little wizards. No, a troll broke into the school. Why are you all looking at Professor Wilson? This is what you call a safety drill. I'm not surprised it was chosen on Halloween. Snape beside Anduin couldn't help but complain in a low voice. That's right. After Quirrell rushed in to report that a troll had broken in, the first reaction of the professors, including Dumbledore, was to look at Anduin. Dumbledore, it was Anduin's fault. He mentioned before the start of school that there would be some safety drills and even warned that he wouldn't notify them in advance. Isn't this exactly what he was talking about? A troll attack. So terrifying. But it seems like it might be fake. Quirrell, who fainted on the ground, might be cooperating with Anduin in this act. At this moment, Anduin realized he had been misunderstood. He shrugged helplessly. This troll has nothing to do with me. If it were me, I wouldn't use such low-level methods. If I wanted to stage a show, I would make it grander. Who would be scared by a mere troll? Anduin couldn't help but complain inwardly. I see, Dumbledore said, understanding that Anduin had no part in this. However, he still asked, what do you suggest we do next? Treat this as a one-time emergency rehearsal. All right, Anduin replied, pursing his lips in mild frustration. There was nothing to rehearse about. A troll. Despite his disdain for the so-called emergency, Anduin stood up without hesitation. Everyone, pay attention, he commanded. 6th and 7th year students, gather and form teams according to the standard action team in the tactical training course. Then immediately disperse into the basement to start the investigation. Follow the second article of Chapter 4 of the Tactical Manual upon finding the target. I want it alive. As Anduin spoke, his demeanor became icy, and his tone carried an undeniable authority. Yes! The 6th and 7th year students who had taken the tactical training course responded immediately. They drew their wands almost simultaneously, forming formations with their nearby companions. Soon, a dozen or so four-person teams were assembled, and these teams rushed out of the auditorium in an orderly but swift manner. The rest of you, form the morning practice queue now and follow me. Let's go to the scene. 5th year students, you are responsible for maintaining order and ensuring no one falls behind, Anduin instructed. With that, Anduin left the teacher's seat and hurriedly led the way out of the auditorium. End of this chapter. Chapter 663, The Giant Monster. What? Are you going to take everyone to watch that giant monster? Snape exclaimed, rushing to Anduin's side with a look of disbelief. That's a dark magic creature. Are you sure you want to let so many young wizards approach it? What if something goes wrong? It's just a giant monster, Anduin replied with a sneer. Flowers in a greenhouse can't thrive. This is a chance for senior wizards to practice dealing with large creatures, and it also serves as an emergency avoidance lesson for others. And what are you afraid of with me here? Do you think I'd let a stupid giant hurt someone? If you don't want to follow, help ensure Celestina Warbeck's safe departure, and remind her not to spread nonsense in the press." With that, Anduin walked out of the auditorium without looking back, leaving Snape and the other professors in stunned silence. It was the first time they had encountered someone handling a situation like this. Typically, the first step would be to evacuate the young wizards, not rush them towards the danger. After receiving Anduin's instructions, the students' initial panic turned into surprise, and then excitement. "Did you hear that? The professor is going to take us to hunt the troll." Ron, who had been the most nervous, was now brimming with excitement. "But is it really appropriate to do this? I read that the troll is a dark magic creature with a danger level of Flaxseed. What if someone gets hurt?" Hermione voiced her concerns, finding Anduin's behavior unreasonable. "Didn't you see that the professor sent senior wizards ahead? They must have a plan." Harry reassured her as they joined the queue of students rushing out. Do you know what the Tactical Manual, Chapter 4, Article 1 that the professor mentioned is?" Neville asked, more intrigued by the tactical manual than the situation itself. "I saw it in tactical training," Hermione said, showing her know-it-all side. The tactical manual is a crucial part of the book's tactical chapter. It outlines specific standard measures to take in enemy or dangerous situations. Every Auror of the Ministry of Magic is expected to master it proficiently. As for Chapter 4, Article 1, if I remember correctly, it deals with strategies for coping with large magical creatures. It explains in detail how to capture and kill large creatures, but there are many technical terms in it that I don't fully understand. "Cool," Ron exclaimed, his excitement growing. "Then will we see this strategy in action later?" "Maybe," Hermione replied uncertainly, then pointed ahead. "Look, we've met those senior wizards." Sure enough, Anduin and his group encountered 4 students guarding the corridor, who were reporting the situation to him. "Professor, we have located the target. The giant monster is wandering around the girls' bathroom. 4 teams are already executing the capture mission, and the rest are guarding various intersections according to the tactical manual. Everything is proceeding normally," a 7th-year student reported respectfully. "Very well. Has the bathroom been checked? Are there any innocent people involved?" Anduin asked, nodding to the students. The senior wizard hesitated, realizing they hadn't checked the bathroom. "So, you didn't even check the scene of the incident, and you dare to tell me that everything is normal?" Anduin glared at the student, clearly dissatisfied. He then pulled a monocle from his coat pocket, preparing to assess the situation himself. Anduin put on his cloak and looked in a certain direction. "It's a good thing no one was trapped. Otherwise, you would be seriously derelict in your duty." After using the echo charm to confirm the safety of the incident, Anduin gave them a serious look, then waved his hand decisively. "Everyone, follow me. This is an opportunity for you to learn how to fight large creatures." With that, Anduin quickened his pace. The senior wizards beside him, looking a bit ashamed, followed along with the large group. After navigating 2 more corners, they finally arrived at the scene of the incident and saw the giant monster that had broken in. The creature stood 12 feet tall, with dull, granite-gray skin and a small, bald head resembling a coconut perched on its shoulders. Its legs were thick, ending in flat, calloused feet. The troll's arms were long, and it held a hardwood stick in its hand. The disgusting stench emanating from its body made the nearby young wizards cover their mouths and noses. When they were about 30 meters away from the giant monster, Anduin stopped and signaled the young wizards to spread out to both sides, clearly preparing to demonstrate how to capture the giant monster. At the scene, 4 teams, totaling 12 people, had already surrounded the troll. One small group of wizards was casting a spell on the ground, creating a smooth ice surface under the troll's feet. The other 3 teams kept their distance, carefully guarding with their wands, ready for any emergencies and waiting for the right moment. The enraged troll roared and swung its long arms, frantically waving its giant stick, attempting to rush at some of the wizards. However, the senior wizards reacted quickly, dodging the attack. The ice under the troll's feet made it slip, and it fell to the ground with a loud thud, causing a violent vibration that everyone felt. The sight of the giant sliding on the ice made everyone burst into laughter. "Look at that big guy. He's really stinky and stupid." George, who was among the onlookers, laughed loudly. The troll, seemingly hearing George's taunt, roared angrily and threw its stick towards the crowd of young wizards. "Be careful!" a team of senior wizards shouted, casting spells to intercept the stick. However, the stick flew too fast, and their spells, Floating Charm, Obstacle Charm, and Freezing Charm, failed to stop it. The stick was about to hit the crowd. As George watched the stick grow larger in his sight, the young wizards around him froze, their minds going blank, forgetting to shout or dodge. "Wingardium Leviosa! Wingardium Leviosa!" Two voices rang out from the crowd just as the stick was about to hit. The wooden stick was held firmly in midair by the successful casting of the spell. When everyone regained their senses, they saw that the two who had cast the spell were Ron and Hermione, standing not far from George. Their faces were full of horror, but they kept their wands raised, maintaining the spell. Seeing that their spell had worked, the panicked expressions on Ron and Hermione's faces slowly faded away. The two exchanged a knowing smile. They hadn't discussed casting the spell beforehand. It was entirely spontaneous. Yet they were both quick to react. Anduin, who had witnessed the entire scene, first gave the four senior wizards a cold stare. He then turned his icy gaze to George before softening his expression and nodding approvingly at Ron and Hermione. With the crisis averted, the wizards responsible for containing the trolls resumed their actions. They cast sleeping spells on the fallen trolls, ensuring they were immobilized. If not for the unexpected situation earlier, this would have been a standard capture operation. "Professor, the troll has been captured. What should we do next?" Gemma Farley, who was directing the on-site operations, approached Anduin nervously. "All right, everyone stand aside and await further instructions," Anduin replied, giving her a stern look. He then addressed the group behind him. "Now, everyone gather around and form a circle around the troll." As Anduin walked towards the troll, the others obediently surrounded it. The recent incident had left many of them shaken, and they eyed the grotesque creature with a mix of fear and curiosity. For many, this was their first close encounter with a dark magical creature. Once everyone was in position, Anduin stepped onto the troll's stomach, looking down at the group with authority. "You've all witnessed the troll's behavior and the senior wizard's capture mission. Now, I will evaluate this operation. The result of the evaluation is unqualified," Anduin declared, casting a cold glance at the senior wizards. "First of all, you failed at the basic task of on-site investigation. How many times have I taught you in class? The first step upon reaching an accident scene is to troubleshoot and search for trapped individuals. Why didn't you check the interior of the bathroom? Was it because the troll emerged from there?" Anduin pointed to the nearby girls' bathroom, reprimanding the senior wizards without hesitation. Chapter 664, Dangerous Thoughts. "Secondly, I noticed a significant problem with your mentality during missions. More than one of you was distracted and inattentive at the mission site. Do you think dealing with a giant monster poses no threat to you? Or do you believe you can relax just because I'm here? The four of you couldn't even stop a wooden stick thrown with brute force." Anduin's expression was extremely cold as he spoke, and the senior wizards lowered their heads one by one under his gaze, clearly feeling the sting of his words. "Finally," Anduin continued, "your efficiency in carrying out the task was abysmal. You even gave the giant monster a chance to fight back. Why didn't you attack its lower limbs directly after laying the ice? Do you have to wait for it to slide on its own? And the timing of subduing the troll was too late. You could have attacked while restricting its movements. Additionally, after the troll threw its weapon, you all stood there in a daze. What was there to see? The execution standard I taught you is how to handle situations with a small team configuration. Yet your four small teams besieging a giant monster were so delayed, it was simply a failure." Anduin didn't hold back at all, scolding the wizards face to face, leaving them unable to lift their heads. "When we return, everyone involved in the operation will write a 12-foot-long review to be handed in during the tactical training course next week." A 12-foot-long review? The senior wizards were mortified. Did they really have to write something that long? Many of them realized that the length of the review was about the same as the troll's height. Did Anduin decide the homework based on the size of the enemy? If they dealt with something larger, would the review be even longer? If it were a dragon, would they have to write tens of feet? But Anduin didn't give them any chance to refute. After reprimanding the senior wizards, he immediately turned his attention to George in the crowd. "And you, do you think the troll is too stupid to recognize a provocation? You made such a reckless move in the face of a dark magic creature, endangering yourself and your companions. Gryffindor loses 20 points. Being stared at by Anduin, even the mischievous George knew he had made a big mistake. He had almost been hit by the troll's club, and the others around him had nearly suffered as well. Anduin quickly turned to look at Ron and Hermione next to him. However, you two reacted quickly and responded well. You saved 20 points for Gryffindor. Thank you, Professor. Hermione exchanged a happy look with Ron, and their companions gave them appreciative glances. But the problem now is that there were so many people at the scene, yet only 2 first-year wizards responded. Are the rest of you idiots? Didn't you know you also have a magic wand? Anduin said mercilessly. Today's unexpected incident gave him an intuitive understanding of the resilience of these young wizards. These children, who grew up in a peaceful environment, had forgotten what danger was. Even though Anduin had taught them some fighting skills, it couldn't make up for their lack of subjective initiative. As long as there were professors or adult wizards around, they forgot to think and respond independently when they encountered trouble. In fact, when the troll threw its wooden club, Anduin could have stopped and protected them directly. But to test everyone's reaction, he deliberately slowed down his rescue. The result was very disappointing. So many were frightened and stood still. After hearing Anduin's words, the students felt a mix of shame and determination to improve. Everyone present bowed their heads in embarrassment or self-reproach, especially George and Fred, who had been too relaxed due to Anduin's presence. It seems that to improve your basic response and crisis awareness, I need to take some measures, Anduin said, narrowing his eyes with a determined expression. Starting tomorrow, be on your guard. I will launch surprise attacks on you at stealth, anytime, any place, and in any form. I want to see if you can apply the tactical training you've learned to real emergency situations, or if you just learn it and forget it, he continued. And note that every time there's an emergency, I will grade your response. These grades will directly affect your final assessments. Do you understand? Anduin paced back and forth on the troll's stomach, making sure his words reached everyone. What? The little wizards at the scene looked horrified. The professor attacking them himself, and it would count towards their final grades? What's your reaction? Didn't you have enough to eat just now? Do you understand? Anduin raised his voice, emphasizing his point. We understand. Although everyone was reluctant, they could only respond loudly. They didn't know what Anduin's so-called attacks would entail, but recalling the professor's past behavior, fear still gripped their hearts. Seeing their concerns, Anduin added, Don't worry, the surprise inspections will not exceed your current tolerance. The items involved are all things I've explained in the course. What you need to learn is to think calmly in an emergency. Yes, Professor. After listening to Anduin's explanation, although still uneasy, they felt somewhat relieved. Good. Now everyone is dismissed. Reflect on today's lessons when you return to your respective houses. Anduin ordered the prefects to lead the students away. After everyone had dispersed, he turned his head and looked at a corner not far away. Headmaster Dumbledore, you can come out now. It was a vivid lesson, Dumbledore said, stepping out of the shadows with a slight smile. But aren't you being too strict? It's normal for some ordinary children to be unable to react in such situations. I don't want ordinary, Anduin replied, shaking his head. Only by shedding more blood and sweat in training can they avoid dying on the battlefield. Isn't that why you invited me back to Hogwarts? If the Dark Lord returns as you expect, they will need to learn to fend for themselves. We can't always be there to protect them. It's clear you care about them very much. That reassures me, Dumbledore nodded, relieved. He could see that Anduin's actions were genuinely for the benefit of the students, which eased a lot of his own pressure. Let's not dwell on that. How is the situation on the fourth floor? The timing of this troll's appearance is too coincidental. Presumably, the person behind the scenes has already started to act. Anduin asked, jumping off the troll. Indeed. Dumbledore confirmed Anduin's suspicion, his expression slightly disappointed. You must have guessed it. It was Quirrell. He tried to sneak in right after you. Did he succeed? Anduin was not surprised to learn it was Quirrell. He had suspected Quirrell's identity before. This troll was something Dumbledore had prepared after taking on the #1 copy project, presumably because Quirrell had been eyeing the Philosopher's Stone since then. No, he was blocked by Fluffy. Dumbledore shook his head. From this, it seems his strength is not as formidable as we feared. And he should still be under our control. So you're going to continue to keep him as bait? Anduin asked, understanding Dumbledore's implication. This is the best choice. I still don't know his exact position. Is he being controlled, bewitched, or is he merely a pawn? Does Quirrell have a direct relationship with the Dark Lord, or is he just connected to the Death Eaters? Dumbledore muttered, seemingly unsure if he was speaking to Anduin or pondering aloud. It's too passive. If you ask me, we should just arrest him. I'm confident I can uncover what's hidden in his mind. There's no need to keep a ticking time bomb by my side, Anduin argued, clearly disapproving of Dumbledore's approach. If it were up to him, he would employ a combination of torture, tracking, disguise, and sneak attacks. Regardless of who the manipulator is, he would eliminate them all. Don't worry, Dumbledore said, though he seemed to have some reservations. I want to use this opportunity to understand the current state of the Dark Lord. It would be ideal if we could facilitate direct contact between him and Harry. Do you think that boy will truly face his nemesis? Your thoughts are very dangerous, Anduin replied, casting a disapproving glance at Dumbledore. Bardnor once told me that you are superstitious about prophecies. I didn't believe it at first. Do you really believe in the so-called savior? Pinning our hopes on a child makes us look like failures. Anduin had always scoffed at the notion of fate and prophecy. He had encountered similar beliefs during his travels, whether from centaurs or prophetic wizards. He knew that these so-called prophecies were often vague and open to interpretation, sometimes even seeming to fit any outcome. To him, they were no different from nonsense. End of this chapter. Chapter 665, Student Profile, Seeking Monthly Ticket Recommendation. When you have a deep enough understanding of this world, you will know that nothing is impossible, Dumbledore said, not directly refuting Anduin, but offering an apology. I'm sorry. Please forgive an old man's willfulness. I believe that with you here, Harry will not be harmed. Anyway, you are the headmaster of Hogwarts, so it's up to you to do whatever you want, as long as you can bear the final result, Anduin replied non-committally. Why should he worry about his boss as a part-time worker? As for the so-called Voldemort, to be honest, he was really not afraid. After their conversation ended, the old man left the scene leisurely. Clearly, Anduin's presence made him feel at ease about Hogwarts, but Anduin didn't delay. He quickly transported the giant monster away. Such material couldn't be wasted in vain. Since it had fallen into his hands after several twists and turns, he might as well throw it into the first copy and continue to make use of it. After completing this series of tasks, Anduin returned to his office at Hogwarts and then transferred back to the Leona through the any door inside. This any door, which allowed him to teleport directly across space, was actually the result of Anduin's research on the disappearing cabinet over the past few years. Although it was called any door, it was not strictly out of the category of a cabinet, as it was more than 20 centimeters thick but shaped like a door. This door could directly connect his home in Godric's Hollow, Diagon Alley's Silver Flash firm, his Hogwarts office, suitcase space, Leona, and several branches abroad. So even if he had to run back to Diagon Alley to handle official business in his spare time, it wouldn't waste much time. When Anduin returned to the ship's office, he ran into Hog, who was dressed in a black robe like a vampire. Recently, this guy seemed to be very obsessed with cosplay. He liked to change into different outfits on different occasions, such as training clothes during morning exercises, a doctor's outfit during physical examinations, and even serious formal clothes while on duty at the training ground. Now it was even more outrageous. He was obviously a wolf with the appearance of a husky, but he had to wear a vampire costume. After seeing Anduin, Hogg complained with a displeased face. "It's really unlucky. I just happened to encounter a giant monster invasion. I was going to pretend to be a ghost to scare those little kids tonight, and I wasted this well-prepared Halloween outfit." "Where did you get these clothes?" Anduin asked, quite speechlessly. "Who exactly ordered so many weird outfits for you?" "Hi, it's not that we cooperated with the Mrs. Malkin robe store and ordered a large number of training clothes. Mrs. Malkin gave us a lot of coupons to thank us for taking care of her business. I figured you usually have your clothes custom-made from France, so you probably wouldn't need them. I just used them as waste," Hogg replied indifferently, taking off the grimace mask on his face. Anduin shook his head helplessly. He found that after returning to Hogwarts, Hogg had become extremely excited. Should he find some other work for him? Otherwise, the role-playing every day would be troublesome. Running wild in school was not an option. "Let's not talk about this. Have you prepared all the materials I asked you to sort out?" Anduin suppressed the bad thoughts in his heart and returned to the topic. "It's done. I put all those materials on your desk. I recorded all the noteworthy little wizards in grades 1 to 5 and also commented on them. Among them, the little kids in grades 1 to 3 are the most important. Most of the students in the 4th and 5th grades have already been established," Hogg reported. During this month, Hogg was not idle. With ample time to interact with the young wizards, Anduin assigned him the task of screening potential candidates for the tactical club. To accomplish this, Hogg meticulously created a file detailing noteworthy students, including their academic performance, physical condition, and moral evaluations. Nimbly, Hogg leaped into the air and transformed into a small puppy, landing gracefully on the desk. He opened a document and began to brief Anduin. "In the 4th and 5th grades, there aren't many suitable candidates. We should pay attention to Oliver Wood, Percy Weasley, and Penelope Clearwater. Percy stands out the most. His thinking is mature, and his grades are excellent. However, his vanity is a significant flaw. There's also Marcus Flint, who was held back a grade due to poor performance. Despite this, he's physically fit because he's older than his peers. I've included him as a candidate." Anduin frowned. "Let's not waste time on someone like Marcus. If he doesn't join the Death Eaters after graduation and ends up dying by my hand, I'll consider it a blessing." Without hesitation, he crossed out Marcus's name. "This club isn't a dumping ground for everyone." "Understood," Hogg replied, scratching out Marcus's name with his paw. "There are many promising students in grades 1 to 3. For the 3rd graders, Hufflepuff's Cedric is exceptional. His attitude and conduct are impeccable, though he's a bit too kind. Even I would feel guilty bullying him." Hogg didn't mention the Weasley twins, as they were already default candidates. "Give Cedric more opportunities to face challenges. Being overly honest won't get him far," Anduin advised, acknowledging Hogg's judgment. He was well acquainted with Cedric's character. In the 2nd grade, Chu Zhang and Terrence Higgs stand out. Terrence is Villain's younger brother, and like his brother, he's upright. This year, he's also been selected as Slytherin's Seeker, Hogg pointed out. "Villain has been a professional Quidditch player since graduation, but I haven't seen him in a while," Anduin mused, recalling his former schoolmate. Naturally, he would keep an eye on Villain's younger brother. "Lastly, let's focus on the first-year students," Hogg said, turning to the relevant section of the file. "In Gryffindor, Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione are noteworthy. They've been working hard and consistently training. Hermione Granger is particularly impressive. She's intelligent, calm under pressure, loves to read, and is highly motivated. She quickly transforms her knowledge into combat effectiveness," Hogg continued. "Yes, I've noticed her. However, she can be impulsive and proud. She needs more setbacks to temper her character," Anduin advised, sitting back in his chair with his hands clasped. "I understand," Hogg nodded. "As for Harry, Ron, and Neville, they're progressing steadily. Harry's physical condition has improved significantly, and Neville, with Hermione's help, has become much better at casting spells, compensating for some of his previous weaknesses. Once they join the club, we can continue to develop their skills," Hogg concluded. "I will make other arrangements. These two children have strong potential, and they are key training targets. Anduin recalled the scene from more than half a month ago when several people visited his collection room at the club. The alchemy equipment chosen by these two was far superior to what the others had selected, and their approval of those pieces of equipment was noteworthy. Understood, Hogg replied. As for the Hufflepuff students, the ones to watch are Hannah Abbott, Susan Bones, and Ernie Macmillan. You must be familiar with them. Yes, Burns and Macmillan are familiar names, Anduin said with a slight smile. He knew that Susan Bones was the niece of Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and Edgar Bones, his alchemy mentor. Ernie Macmillan was the nephew of Merlin Macmillan, who had been the Hufflepuff 7th-year prefect and student council president when Anduin was a prefect. It was surprising to see the nephews of his old friends now as his pupils. As for Ravenclaw, Terry Boot and Mandy Brocklehurst have performed relatively well. Unfortunately, most of the students in this house are quorms and don't seem to prioritize physical training. Otherwise, there might have been more selections. For Slytherin, Daphne Greengrass, Pansy Parkinson, and Draco Malfoy show the most potential. By the way, Daphne Greengrass is Vanessa's eldest niece. She also has a younger niece, Astoria, who won't be entering school for another 2 years. This family certainly has its share of witches. Why do you always concern yourself with these trivial matters? Anduin gave Hogg a disapproving look. I just looked into some things in my free time, Hogg said, scratching his head awkwardly. Also, about Pansy Parkinson and Draco Malfoy, do you need to consider them more carefully? They have potential, but their personalities. End of this chapter. Chapter 666, Dead, Request for a Recommended Monthly Ticket. What are you referring to? Anduin asked noncommittally. The two children, Pansy Parkinson and Draco Malfoy, both come from wizarding families that uphold the supremacy of pure blood. Their families have elders who were Death Eaters, especially Draco. His father, Lucius, was beaten by you. Do we need to train students for these kinds of people? Despite being just a dog, Hogg's thoughts were deeper than those of many human wizards. After all, he had followed Anduin for a long time and knew a lot about the inner workings of the wizarding world. Anduin lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Based on your observation, how is their conduct, especially, have their thoughts and views been fully formed? They're just a bunch of 11-year-old kids, Hogg shrugged teasingly. But they do have a lot of bad habits from their families. These two kids are domineering and ambitious, with proud personalities. They usually treat others harshly, even the little wizards from the same academy. However, I have noticed that Draco seems to be very concerned about Harry. He likes to put on airs in front of him as if he regards Harry as a secret rival. In a sense, his thoughts are very simple, but his methods are a bit nasty. So they are just two spoiled brats, Anduin nodded, which aligned with his own observations. Let's put the two of them on the list first. Although their predecessors went the wrong way, it's not a reason to blame them. I still have the confidence to train them well, and... Anduin narrowed his eyes slightly. They're elders. It's not impossible to help us. Lucius, I remember him. Hey, it seems that someone is going to be unlucky. Hogg showed a mischievous smile, knowing that Anduin was planning something again. Don't say so much. Record the files of the candidates and find them in person tomorrow. Have these people gather in my office before dinner. Anduin decided to use internal observations to determine the candidates for the tactical club. The selection he mentioned to the little wizards before was just an excuse to motivate everyone. He didn't have the time to conduct a medical examination for everyone who applied. Directly to the office? Are you going to take them to the ranch? Hogg knew that Anduin's office was small, so it must involve using the any door. If they were coming to the ship, they would just go to the dock. Anduin would definitely not take them outside the school, so the most reasonable place to go was naturally the ranch in the suitcase space. That's right. Since we're going to give them a small treatment, it should be all-encompassing. Anduin showed a meaningful smile, clearly planning to give these little wizards a surprise. The next day, the Hogwarts students hadn't recovered from the previous night's troll incident. They had been discussing it all day and night. Whether it was the embryonic senior wizard tactical team trained by Professor Wilson, the ugly and funny troll who couldn't fight back in front of the tactical team, or Anduin's furious rage at the scene, all left various suspenses that aroused everyone's curiosity. What do you think will happen with the surprise attack the professor mentioned? Is he going to jump out from a corner and beat us up? At noon, Harry and the others, who had finished their lessons, were slowly moving towards the auditorium. Ron couldn't help but bring up the topic. I think we may be overthinking it. Didn't you listen to what the professor said? His test will only be within the scope of the lecture. Our tactical training class now only includes physical fitness, reaction, and balance training. We haven't even started learning free combat and self-defense spells yet, Harry replied. I never thought the so-called surprise inspection would fall on us freshmen. Hermione's tone was noticeably less aggressive this time, a sign of the growing camaraderie between her and Ron after last night's shared experience. That's not certain. I think we'd better be careful, Ron replied, still expressing concern. As they walked along the corridor, several senior wizards approached them. They were all Gryffindor 6th graders. Harry and his friends nodded politely as they passed. Suddenly, one of the 6th graders clutched his throat with a ferocious expression, coughing violently before collapsing to the ground. Everyone, including Harry and his friends, stared in shock. Kevin, what's wrong with you? One of the 6th graders shouted, squatting down to check on their fallen companion. The scene was chaotic as they called Kevin's name loudly, trying to rouse him. Harry and his friends, witnessing the incident, quickly moved forward to help. Kevin's face had turned an abnormal shade of blue, his eyes rolled back, and he was making a clicking sound before he began to foam at the mouth. What should we do? Is Kevin sick? Let's take him to the school hospital, a concerned 6th grader suggested, supporting Kevin's head. Yes, let's help each other and carry him, another wizard echoed. They tried to lift Kevin, but he began to struggle violently, his body trembling uncontrollably. No, his condition is very wrong. Touching him might make it worse. What's wrong with Kevin? He's usually in good health, a witch said anxiously, looking at her companion in distress. Why don't you stay here and take care of him while we go for help? Harry suggested urgently. If we meet any professors on the way, we'll bring them too. Yes, that's a good idea. The hospital wing is 3 floors away. You can go there for help, a 6th grader agreed. Harry nodded and was about to leave with his friends when he noticed Hermione standing aside, lost in thought. What's wrong, Hermione? We need to hurry and get help. Kevin can't hold on much longer. Harry shook her gently, urging her to move. Kevin, I think I've seen his symptoms in a book, Hermione said uncertainly. It seems like he's not sick, but poisoned. Poisoned? Harry and the others, along with Kevin's friends, looked at her in disbelief. How could Kevin be poisoned for no reason? No, it's true. I remember reading about it in the detoxification chapter of tactical training. Kevin's symptoms are very similar to those caused by eating poison celery, a magical plant, Hermione explained, her certainty growing as she observed Kevin more closely. Now that you mention it, I do remember something like that, a wizard surrounding Kevin said. The professor talked about it in our tactical training class a couple of weeks ago. Hemlock is a highly poisonous plant. If not treated in time, you'll die on the spot, Hermione interjected, finishing the other person's sentence. What? Harry and the others looked at Hermione in shock. Will die? According to the book, after ingesting hemlock and showing symptoms, you have only 3 to 6 minutes to treat it, otherwise. Hermione's face turned extremely pale as she spoke. Then what should we do to detoxify? The book must also have a method for detoxification. Ron swallowed nervously. He had never seen a dead person before. Was he going to witness one today? Or worse, would it happen right in front of him? The rest of the 6th grade wizards also looked at Hermione nervously. Panic set in, and their minds went blank. They couldn't remember how the professor had taught them to handle such situations. Let me think. Hermione frowned, trying to recall the information. She was extremely nervous, and a thin layer of cold sweat formed on her palms. If it's to detoxify hemlock poison, I think there's a potion that needs to be brewed with the seeds of Nanhook, but it takes at least a whole day to prepare. It's too late. Wait, Hermione suddenly remembered something. For emergency detoxification, you can use a bezoar. Additionally, since hemlock's toxin circulates mainly through the blood, bloodletting can be used to prolong the time before the poison takes full effect. At this critical moment, Hermione finally recalled the information from the textbook. The people around her were overjoyed upon hearing this. A sixth-grade wizard quickly drew out his wand and pressed it against Kevin's wrist, preparing to perform bloodletting as first aid. But just then, Kevin, who had been struggling and trembling, suddenly twitched violently. His whole body went limp, like a balloon that had lost all its air, and he collapsed to the ground, motionless. Kevin! The wizard who was about to cast the spell froze in shock. He kept calling Kevin's name while reaching out his trembling hand to check for a pulse at the tip of Kevin's nose. Sorry, missed a chapter today. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 and 67, Cause of Death, Stupidity. Kevin, he is not breathing. The sorcerer felt the emptiness at his fingertips and instantly felt his whole body stiffen. He fell to the ground, trembling. How is it possible? Ron's face turned pale with fright. In fact, it wasn't just him. The rest of the group also showed expressions of disbelief upon hearing the news. They couldn't understand why a former companion suddenly fell in front of them. Why is this happening? Where did Kevin get the hemlock? How could something so good be poisoned? And is he really dead? Everyone at the scene looked at Kevin's lifeless body. Their minds were either blank or racing with wild thoughts. Additionally, they all felt their stomachs churning. Ron was the first to succumb, bending down and vomiting bile. These underage wizards had probably never seen a dead person before, let alone a friend who had just lost his life. Help! Someone help! The wizard who first noticed Kevin's death broke down and burst into tears. He sat there, wailing loudly, begging for help, his nose and tears streaming down his cheeks. The rest of the group, including Harry and Hermione, were dumbfounded. These young wizards were scared to death, and Ron continued to vomit beside them. Stop howling! If you hadn't delayed the rescue, how could Kevin have died so inexplicably? Just when everyone was at a loss, a familiar mocking voice suddenly came from their ears. When they looked around, they found Hogg slowly walking out from an unknown corner, with Anduin standing beside him with a serious expression. At this time, the state of the person and the dog was very strange. They both held recording boards in their hands, writing something on them from time to time. It didn't look like they had met everyone by chance. Hogg? Hermione was taken aback when she saw Hogg, then looked eagerly at Anduin. Professor, something is wrong. Kevin accidentally ate hemlock, and now we don't know what to do. Do you have a way to save him? After hearing Hermione's cry for help, the rest of them also looked at Anduin eagerly, as if the professor could bring Kevin back to life. However, under the circumstances of being watched by everyone, Anduin didn't pay attention to the others at all. Instead, he gave Hermione a look of approval. As a first-year student, you were able to quickly recognize that Kevin was poisoned by hemlock through his symptoms and give advice in a relatively calm manner. This is really good. 10 points for Gryffindor. Huh, Professor? What time is this? Why are you still in the mood to give us extra points? A sixth-year wizard next to Kevin looked at Anduin anxiously. He suddenly felt that the atmosphere at the scene was full of absurdity. On one side were a group of little wizards who were anxious to death, and on the other side were Professor Wilson and Hogg, who were calm and composed. First of all, there are 2 points I want to clarify, Anduin sneered. First, I gave points to Hermione, not you. Second, Kevin was killed by your stupidity. If you had learned to think calmly like Hermione, Kevin's outcome would have been very different. Hearing that Anduin was still talking nonsense at this time, the little wizards at the scene were about to collapse. Kevin was dead. How could he remain so calm? Professor, what kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Hermione, who was next to her, seemed to have noticed something at this moment and looked at Anduin suspiciously. Someone has figured it out. Hogg at Anduin's feet laughed happily. You don't think Kevin was really poisoned to death, do you? This was just a simple surprise inspection. Didn't Professor Wilson explain it to you last night? Spot checks? Everyone at the scene widened their eyes in shock. They hadn't fully grasped the situation yet, reacted yet. Then Kevin? A wizard pointed palely at Kevin lying beside him. This is a real person. Could it be that the so-called surprise inspection is to kill people in front of them? This Kevin. Anduin looked at the corpse, lying on the ground, and smiled slightly. He drew out his wand and pointed it at the body. Everyone watched as Kevin's body, like a candle in a fire, began to dissolve rapidly. In a matter of moments, it transformed into a palm-sized humanoid doll, which flew into Anduin's hand. This is a stand-in doll, a special alchemy prop that can mimic any wizard, even imitating their voice and expressions. The Kevin you saw was actually this doll, Anduin explained with a smile, tossing the prop in his hand. After seeing Anduin's demonstration, several people at the scene breathed a sigh of relief, as if recovering from a serious illness. They had been truly terrified. Watching a wizard die in front of them was no laughing matter. What about the real Kevin? I remember he had lunch with us just now. Could it be that he was always fake? The wizard who had been crying over Kevin's body was still worried about his companion and asked anxiously. He's still lying in the boys' bathroom, Hogg said teasingly, curling his lips. There were actually 2 surprise inspections, one for Kevin and one for you, but clearly none of you passed. After Hogg's explanation, everyone finally understood what had happened. It turned out that after Kevin and his group had lunch in the auditorium, Kevin went to the bathroom alone. During this time, Hogg launched a surprise attack on him. Kevin, completely unprepared, was knocked out on the spot. Then Anduin used the stand-in doll to become Kevin and blend into the crowd, leading to the staged poisoning incident. So that's what happened, the wizard said, wiping away his tears and struggling to get up. Professor, you nearly scared us to death with Kevin. No, with you. How can you make fun of people's lives like this? You also know that you can't make fun of people's lives? Anduin glanced at everyone coldly. I am very surprised by your performance. To be honest, I didn't expect you to be so foolish. I just instructed everyone on this yesterday. And the result? Kevin was so defenseless against an enemy who didn't even approach silently. He was knocked out like a fool. Your reactions showed me what it means to be at a loss. Even a first-year student can recognize the symptoms of poisoning, but none of you could. You should know that I gave you a first aid class not long ago. This is all basic knowledge. But we were really frightened by Kevin's situation. The wizard tried to defend himself. So you killed him. Anduin snapped, then turned to Hogg. Record this. On October 10th, 1991, Kevin, a 6th-year Gryffindor student, died once because his companions were desperate and stupid. Got it, Hogg replied with a smile, picking up a pen with his nimble dog paws and writing vigorously on the recording board. This, you. The wizard looked back and forth between Anduin and Hogg with a tangled expression. He was so bewildered that he couldn't even speak. Don't worry, you might be the one who dies next time. In short, everyone will get their turn. But considering your poor performance this time, maybe next time we can use a poison with a longer poisoning time. That way, we won't need to use a substitute. We can poison people directly, Hogg said, half mockingly and half seriously. After hearing Hogg's unsettling suggestion, everyone at the scene turned pale with fright. What did he mean? Would they have to go through this kind of ordeal again? And what did dying once mean? Could there be 2, 3, or even 4 deaths? This idea can be adopted, and the non-lethal toxin can be used directly on people. In the eyes of everyone, Hoggen's outrageous opinion seemed absurd. However, after a moment of contemplation, Anduin surprisingly agreed with a serious expression. Professor, are these surprise inspections still going on? Isn't this a bit too scary? Hermione couldn't help but protest after overhearing Anduin's conversation with the senior wizard. The idea of such frightening raids seemed to go beyond the scope of a mere test. Don't worry, my surprise inspection items are only within your capabilities. The first aid course is only taught after the 5th grade, so you younger wizards don't have to be concerned. Anduin reassured Hermione with a smile, clearly thinking it was nothing out of the ordinary. He then turned his stern gaze to the senior wizards. And as for you, you need to be more careful. You all performed terribly on such a simple test item, and I'm already worried about whether you'll pass the final exam. It was only then that everyone remembered the professor had mentioned the previous night that these surprise attack tests would be included in their final grades. "Professor, please give us one more chance. We promise we won't make the same mistakes again," the sixth-year wizards pleaded, their faces full of regret. "That depends on your luck," Anduin replied noncommittally. "The surprise inspections are completely random, and I can't guarantee who will be next. Anyway, the result of your assessment this time is failed." With that, Anduin turned around gracefully and left the scene. The sixth-year wizards left behind could only look at each other in dismay and shake their heads helplessly. They couldn't decide whether they were fortunate or unfortunate to have a professor like Anduin. End of this chapter. Chapter 668, The Contract. "Don't just stand there." Hog, who hadn't left yet, called out to the group. "Go to the bathroom and help Kevin. He'll probably start to smell bad soon." After shooing away the sixth graders, Hog turned back to Harry and the others. "By the way, I almost forgot to tell you that you've been successfully selected into the Tactical Club. Make sure to report to the professor's office before dinner today. Do you know where his office is?" Yes, we do," Harry replied, still reeling from the unexpected events. The news they had been anxiously awaiting had finally arrived, but they were too stunned to celebrate. "Good. I have to go make another target, so I won't be staying here," Hog said cheerfully, flicking his tail and bouncing away. "He just said, go to the next person, right?" Harry asked, glancing at everyone uncertainly. "Hog," Ron exclaimed, watching Hog's retreating figure with displeasure. "He just pulled a legal prank during the professor's surprise inspection." Ron turned to Hermione, still in shock. "Do you still think the professor's surprise attacks are harmless? I almost threw up my breakfast. Who knew the professor's so-called unannounced inspections would be so terrifying?" Hermione sighed helplessly. She pulled out her wand and pointed it at Ron's mess with a look of disgust. "You are so useless, vomiting like that. Clean and fresh." Hermione cast a spell to clean up Ron's mess, and then gave him an annoyed look. "It's not my fault. Didn't you guys get scared too?" Ron scratched his head in embarrassment, then suddenly smiled. "But there's good news, isn't there? The professor actually included us in the Tactical Club directly. I thought we'd have to go through layers of screening." "Indeed, it made us worry for nothing," Harry said, shaking off the horrifying scene. After joking with his friends, they continued to the Great Hall. However, their appetites were gone after the ordeal. They feared eating something weird like Kevin and getting poisoned. In the Great Hall, they heard about several other emergencies from other students. It seemed Anduin had started attacking everyone before targeting Kevin. These attacks were extremely sudden. Some were spells shot from hidden corners, some were sneak attacks, and there was another poisoning incident involving a 7th grade Slytherin student. Fortunately, when the other poisoning incident occurred, they managed to cope with it. Gemma Farley from Slytherin had a legendary item with detoxification properties, which proved helpful. In just one morning, Harry and his friends heard about 7 or 8 sudden attacks. The frequency was alarming, causing the entire school to panic. Students moved through the corridors with suspicion, clearly frightened. Harry and his friends made it through the day without further incident. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, they cautiously made their way to the tactical training office. "Ron, we're going to Professor Wilson right now." "There's no need to be so nervous," Harry said, exasperated as he watched Ron move slowly along the wall. Ron seemed to have developed a stress disorder. "That's not true," Ron retorted, glaring at the others. "Didn't you hear at noon? George and Fred were also selected for the Tactical Club, but they got beaten up by Hog." "Maybe they were beaten because of personal grievances," Hermione sighed. "Who made those two think it was a good idea to provoke Hog? If you ask me, they deserved it." "It's not a good habit to speak ill of people behind their backs, Miss Granger." Suddenly, the voice of the twins came from behind them. When they turned around, they saw George and Fred with their heads wrapped in gauze. They caught up with the group, smiling, seemingly on their way to Anduin's office, and just happened to bump into the rest of them. "I would say the same thing in front of you," Hermione retorted, curling her lips arrogantly. "Others are subjected to surprise inspections, but what about you? You dared to provoke Hogg. How were we supposed to know? Fred shrugged, looking a bit indignant. Hogg was involved in almost all the surprise inspections today. He appeared out of nowhere in front of us. Of course, we thought he was coming for us. Who would have thought he was just there to report the news? That's still no reason to take out your wands and attack him, Harry said, glancing at the two in disbelief. He had just heard that as soon as Hogg appeared, George and Fred rolled up their sleeves and rushed forward, only to be beaten. Okay, don't laugh at us, George said awkwardly. It was shameful enough not to beat a dog, but what was even more uncomfortable was being severely reprimanded twice. This time, he and Fred had tried their best, using all the fighting skills Anduin had taught them, but they were still beaten bloody. The group arrived at the tactical training office on the 4th floor, joking with each other. The door was open, and the room was already full of people. Among them were Draco, Susan, and Hannah, familiar students of the same grade as Harry and the others, as well as senior students from the same house like Percy and Wood. There were also many students from other houses who were relatively unfamiliar. Upon seeing Harry and the others walk into the office, Wood greeted them with a smile. "Hey, it seems you have also been selected into the club by the professor. You did a good job." "Thank you. Is everyone here?" Harry asked modestly. "That's right." Percy, the third Weasley brother, leaned over. "We were all notified by Hogg, but I heard that George and Fred had a fight with him." "No, they were beaten," Ron said, covering his mouth and snickering. As the brothers teased each other, Hermione looked at Percy with some doubt. "Didn't the professor say that the candidates for the club must be selected? Why did you directly determine the candidates?" Hey, the sorting ceremony was said to be a test at the beginning, but it turned out that a hat has the final say? Wood clearly understood Anduin's thoughts better. "So even the professor is fooling people?" Hermione pursed her lips in displeasure. Deep down, she had been looking forward to similar exams. "Everyone, be quiet." While they were chatting, Hogg walked in unsteadily from outside the gate, shouting at everyone arrogantly. Seeing that only Hogg appeared without Anduin, no one was surprised. They all knew that Hogg's role was somewhat similar to Anduin's assistant, but everything related to the tactical training course was under his control. "Where's the professor? Didn't we agree to gather? And why did you pick this time?" "My stomach is almost starving," the twins interrupted, knowing Hogg was probably just a sounding board. "Stop talking nonsense. You'll see him soon," Hogg said, glancing at the twins with disdain. "What's the matter? Are you itchy again? Are there not enough bumps on your heads?" George and Fred were furious at Hogg, but given the current environment, it wasn't easy to explode. Hogg even jumped onto the desk triumphantly and took out a stack of parchment. "Everyone, come here. I will take you to the official assembly." "Next, you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement," Hogg announced, distributing parchments to the surrounding students. "Confidentiality agreement? Why do we need to sign this?" Malfoy questioned, his tone laced with skepticism. "My father always warned me against signing magical contracts casually. You never know if you're being tricked." Unlike Anduin, Malfoy showed no respect for Hogg, adopting a haughty demeanor. Hogg, in turn, had no patience for Malfoy's attitude. "If you don't sign, you will have to leave the tactical club, established by Professor Wilson. We don't force anyone to stay. The door is over there," Hogg said, pointing towards the exit. "You!" Malfoy glared at Hogg, his face flushed with anger. "But you have to tell us why. A magical contract is a serious matter." Malfoy wasn't alone in his concern. Many students had been taught from a young age to be wary of signing contracts with unfamiliar wizards. Seeing the apprehension, Hogg sighed and explained, "After joining the tactical club, you will be exposed to many of Professor Wilson's confidential projects and works, some of which are related to national security. Given the professor's status, it's only reasonable to sign a confidentiality agreement." Hogg's explanation piqued the students' curiosity. What could be so secretive? "All right, I'll sign. I trust that Professor Wilson wouldn't harm us," Percy declared, stepping forward to sign his name on the parchment. His confidence inspired his brothers, who followed suit without hesitation. They trusted Anduin implicitly. Seeing Percy and his brothers sign, the rest of the students began to follow their lead. After all, it was just a confidentiality agreement, not an unbreakable vow. Reluctantly, Malfoy and Parkinson also signed, unable to resist the allure of the legendary artifacts they had glimpsed earlier. "Excellent," Hogg said, nodding in satisfaction. "Now, let's invite everyone to enter the alchemical world of Professor Wilson." End of this chapter. Chapter 669. Dinner after Hogg finished speaking, he jumped to the any door standing by the office wall and stretched out his paw to flip the switch on the door. This any door had a round switch that could be twisted, with 5 fan-shaped areas of different colors around it, each representing a different destination. Hogg twisted the switch twice, keeping the pointer in the green area. He opened the door and waved to everyone. "Come on, Professor Wilson is waiting for you. Only those who have signed the contract should come closer." He walked in first, and the rest of the group exchanged glances. It was their first time seeing such a strange alchemy item. The gray fog inside the door prevented them from seeing the other side, making them a bit uneasy. However, Neville, who had experienced any door before, didn't hesitate. He dragged Harry and the others through it. Seeing someone lead the way, the others followed boldly. As they stepped through the door, the scene before them changed dramatically. They found themselves on a vast grassland, with a stretch of fences in the distance that looked like pastures. Hundreds of huge, strange-looking cows and pigs wandered leisurely within the fences. Wow! Everyone's mouths dropped open at the sight. It was their first time experiencing such a vast and magical scene. "What's that?" Harry asked curiously, pointing to the animals in the distant pasture. "Those are Tebow warthogs and Reem cows, both high-risk magical creatures with a danger level of XXXX. Don't provoke them," Wood said, looking into the distance with emotion. "I didn't expect Professor Wilson to raise such a large community of magical animals. Could it be that he also researches magical animal protection?" "No, that's Uncle Wilson's ranch," Neville explained kindly, having been there before. "Ranch?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged puzzled looks. "Then the professor raises them for eating," Neville said with a smile. "These animals are raised by my uncle using special methods, and they taste delicious. Wow, there are so many magical animals, and they're all so big. One of them might be enough to feed us for a month," Ron exclaimed, eyes wide. It seems so. Uncle used to complain that these magical animals grew too fast, and they couldn't eat them all. Didn't he often send us meat before?" Neville smiled at Ron. "If we knew he had so many, we should have asked for more," Ron said enviously. The people around them overheard the conversation and began to wonder if Professor Wilson's big secret was this pasture. The magical animals alone were worth a fortune. "Don't just stand there." Hogg, who was leading the way, saw them standing still and immediately scolded. "Hurry up and follow. Are you going to make Professor Wilson wait for you?" "Oh," everyone responded quickly and followed Hogg to the nearby manor. The layout of this suitcase space was not much different from before, but due to a recent expansion, the manor used as a residence and the research institute next to it had also been expanded several times. The main increase was in the warehouse, where Anduin had collected many valuable items from around the world over the years. As they followed Hogg into the manor, everyone was once again amazed by the interior decoration. The word magnificent didn't do it justice. Everything before them was as beautiful as a dream. A gorgeous star belt, reminiscent of the Milky Way, adorned the ceiling. Some parts appeared misty, while others resembled strands of ribbons hovering and floating in midair. These celestial decorations served as both lighting fixtures and the most enchanting adornments. The walls, shimmering with bits of spiritual light, made everyone feel as if they were in outer space, unable to discern up from down. The room was filled with extraordinary furniture, decorations, tapestries, and magical portraits that constantly emitted magical power. The luxurious leather carpets underfoot, visibly extraordinary, added to the ambiance. Almost everything in the use was a magical creation. The alchemical creations and beautiful scenery captivated everyone, making them linger. If it weren't for Hogg's constant urging, they might not have moved at all. Harry, Malfoy, and others even recognized several items that looked like legendary artifacts, casually placed on shelves or wooden tables as decorations. "Is that the Angel's Rod?" Malfoy marveled at a prop that closely resembled the legendary Angel's Rod. He couldn't believe such legendary items were so casually displayed. Harry, meanwhile, was staring blankly at a stone knight statue standing nearby, which looked very similar to one they had seen at the end of the 4th floor of Hogwarts. As he stared, the statue suddenly opened its eyes and glared at him with light blue, glowing eyeballs. Harry almost yelled in fright and quickly turned around, lowering his head, fearing the statue would shout "Intruder!" and summon a big dog, as it had before. When the group reached a lobby-like area on the 1st floor, they couldn't help but stop and watch. It wasn't strange alchemical props that caught their attention this time, but rather the appearance of other creatures. On a square table at the side of the hall, 3 small creatures were skillfully playing mahjong tiles. One was a bird-shaped creature, the size of a pug, with golden feathers, 4 claws, and 3 pairs of wings, clearly a shrunken Thunderbird Thor. Opposite it was a black bat with a handsome face, which was Shaltir in her transformed state. Next to Shaltir was a chicken with bright red feathers like flames and a crest on its head. This was Irene, the phoenix, who looked like a beautiful chubby chicken at the moment. When everyone saw these 3 strange animals, Shaltir noticed them too. "Why is it taking so long just to lead the way? We're missing 1 out of 3, so move quickly." Shaltir yelled at Hog with a dissatisfied expression. "Understood, you are the one who talks the most nonsense," Hog yelled back, displeased. He then turned to the little wizards behind him. "Didn't you see that you are wasting the master's time? Hurry up!" Hog, clearly in no mood for a leisurely tour, hurried everyone forward as if driving a group of children visiting the zoo. After a while, the group of little wizards was driven to another hall, still curious about the 3 strange creatures they had seen earlier. However, the sight before them quickly diverted their attention. They had arrived at the manor's dining room. A long dining table, laden with fragrant food, stretched out before them. At the head of the table sat Anduin. "My lord, a total of 20 people have been brought here," Hog reported loudly to Anduin, ignoring the crowd behind him. "Well, thank you for your hard work. Go and attend to your own business," Anduin nodded to Hog. Hog then rushed out of the restaurant, clearly eager to get back to his game. "Don't just stand there, take your seats," Anduin instructed, gesturing to the table. Anduin looked at the crowd with a smile and raised his hand in a gesture of invitation. It was only then that the group came to their senses and, with a trace of restraint, sat down at the dining table. The reason for their unease was the strange environment, which felt almost otherworldly. Everything around them seemed to shine, exuding an extraordinary aura. Even Malfoy, who came from a wealthy family, felt a pang of what could only be described as poverty. However, some were more at ease: Percy, Ron, Neville, and the twins. They had known Anduin for a while and had attended his dinners before. They were already salivating and greedily eyeing the delicious food in front of them. "Welcome, everyone. Let's begin. I invited you here before dinner to use this meal as a welcome ceremony for joining the tactical club," Anduin explained softly, noticing their cautiousness. "Thank you, Professor." Wood, who was sitting near the front, responded nervously. The others quickly followed suit, expressing their gratitude to Anduin. But Ron and his friends were not so formal. As soon as Anduin called for dinner, they naturally picked up their tableware and began eating heartily. Their actions helped to ease the atmosphere significantly. Everyone was indeed hungry, so they all started tasting the food prepared by Anduin. The moment they took their first bite, their eyes widened in astonishment. The food was incredibly delicious. The meat was as soft and silky as butter, a taste unlike anything they had experienced before. It was as if the house itself gave off an unreal feeling. The surprising delicacy made the young wizards forget their reservations. "The taste of this steak is amazing, isn't it? Words can't describe it," Hermione exclaimed, stuffing food into her mouth without any regard for ladylike manners. She couldn't help but whisper to Ron beside her. Chapter 670, Advanced System, Seeking Recommendations and Monthly Tickets. "These are magical animals bred on Uncle Wilson's ranch. I told you he has a special feeding method, plus his cooking skills are top-notch. Our happiest day every year is when Uncle Wilson treats guests," Neville said, his face lighting up with pride. He had long been aware of Anduin's craftsmanship. "You mean, these foods were made by the professor himself?" Hermione asked in surprise, clearly not expecting Anduin to possess such a unique skill. "Of course," Neville nodded, looking quite pleased with himself. "Uncle Wilson even invented several food magic tricks, and my grandmother is full of praise for them." "That's right," Ron chimed in from the other side. "The professor can whip up a feast with just a wave of his magic wand. The food we're eating now, like natural steak and grilled beef tenderloin with honey sauce, are all his creations. These dishes are my favorites." With that, Ron began grabbing food from the plate in front of him as if he were hoarding treasure, which did not go unnoticed by the twins next to him. "What are you grabbing? Have you eaten so much?" George angrily snatched 2 pieces of braised pork from Ron's plate with a fork. "You jerk, there are still so many vegetables. Why take mine?" Ron glared at his brother angrily, but George just smirked in response. As everyone enjoyed the food, a magic phonograph was turned on, filling the room with melodious music that perfectly complemented the dinner. Music and food indeed worked wonders in setting the mood. Even those who were initially cautious quickly relaxed in such an atmosphere. Even the slightly wary little wizards like Malfoy gradually blended in, chatting cheerfully with their companions. Anduin observed them quietly, using the atmosphere to explore the mysteries of emotion and feeling. He also took the opportunity to understand the characteristics of these young wizards, which would help in developing future training programs. "How is it? Are you satisfied with today's dinner?" Anduin asked warmly when everyone was almost done eating, like an ordinary chef seeking feedback from his guests. "It was so delicious." "Thank you, Professor, for your hospitality. I didn't expect there would be such benefits in joining the tactical club. Will we have similar opportunities in the future?" Hearing Anduin's inquiry, everyone responded enthusiastically, no longer feeling cramped. Seeing their high spirits, Anduin nodded with satisfaction. "Don't worry, my tactical club will meet every Wednesday from now on, and I will prepare a dinner of the same size for you each time. You can help me consume some of the ranch stock," Anduin said with a smile. "Of course, this is an invisible benefit of the club and falls within the scope of our confidentiality regulations." "Really? Thanks, Professor. I see. This is our little secret. Long live. I didn't expect that joining the club would have such benefits." The little wizards cheered excitedly upon hearing the good news. Even reserved girls like Hermione and Penelo were visibly thrilled. "Okay, everyone calm down." Anduin raised his hand slightly to quiet the room. "Good benefits are not obtained without effort. Corresponding to these benefits will be training content that is more challenging than ordinary courses, and my standards will be higher. In the Tactics Club, I will treat everyone equally, regardless of whether you are a junior or a senior. Understand?" Anduin's gaze swept from Harry and the other first graders to Percy, the 5th grader, his expression gradually becoming serious. "Understood." The little wizards responded in unison. The group was mentally prepared, so they answered in unison without the slightest hesitation after Anduin asked the question. "Very good," Anduin nodded appreciatively. He aimed to create a disciplined troop within Hogwarts that could enforce orders and maintain strict standards. The requirements would be even stricter than those for wizards in grades 6-7. If his GOA, LS for the senior students, were in line with Auror standards, then these younger wizards were to be the real army. Building morale was the first step, and it was rare for them to show such discipline at this stage. "I'm going to arrange the first task for you after dinner," Anduin announced, giving Harry a special look. "Do you remember what I told you about the standards and requirements for joining the Tactics Club? You mentioned that to join the club, one must pass assessments of attribute and level, which means undergoing a physical examination during the selection process and selecting members based on their improvement. But," Harry paused, looking at Anduin with some embarrassment, "but I was directly chosen as a candidate and didn't go through the selection process, right?" Anduin smiled slightly. "I'm sorry for misleading you on that point, but if I hadn't done so, I'm afraid everyone wouldn't have been so enthusiastic about training. I've seen your hard work during this period, and it is truly impressive." Everyone nodded in understanding. They had indeed grown a lot over the past month, and if measured by spellcasting ability alone, they were already ahead of their peers. But it is also true that you need to update the data in your system, Anduin continued. Only by knowing your progress in real time can you stay motivated in your training. So the first task is a physical examination? Harry asked naturally. It's not exactly a physical examination. Anduin shook his head lightly. To measure your attributes and levels in real time, it's not just about a physical examination. The next thing I want to introduce to you is the advanced version of the Silver Flash Talisman. Anduin took out a prop that looked similar to the nameplates everyone wore. The advanced version of the Silver Flash Talisman is a legendary item. Its functions are far more powerful than ordinary talismans. With it, you don't need to undergo a physical examination. You can check your current attributes in real time. If these attributes and levels improve, the data in the system will also update. What? A legendary item? Does that mean we can know our progress at any time? Why wasn't such a magical item distributed at the beginning of the school year? Anduin's introduction immediately caused an uproar, and some raised questions in confusion. The reason why this advanced version of the talisman is not promoted to the whole school, Anduin smiled helplessly, is because of the cost. It is not without reason that it is called a legendary item. If it were released normally, more than half of the students couldn't afford it. I can only provide a limited supply to the Tactics Club. But rest assured, this talisman undergoes a bloodline ceremony and is bound to you. Even after you graduate, I will not take it back. Consider it the second benefit of joining the club. The little wizards showed expressions of understanding and relief. They felt fortunate to have joined the club, as such a valuable item would not have come their way otherwise. This was a legendary item after all. However, some of them caught on to another detail in Anduin's words. Wood asked, puzzled, Professor, what do you mean by the bloodline ceremony? Ritual? Isn't this new type of silver flash amulet just something you put on? That's right, Anduin nodded. This bloodline ritual connects your body and spirit with the amulet. It's precisely because of this connection that it can observe everyone's physical changes in real time. So that's the case. But isn't this kind of ceremony complicated? Wood asked again. Don't worry, I've simplified the ritual. It won't harm your physical condition. I even have such a talisman myself. Anduin then took out a similar talisman from around his neck and showed it to everyone. Then everyone, follow my lead. With that, Anduin snapped his fingers lightly, and a round tray appeared in front of everyone. In the middle of the tray was a silver flash amulet, accompanied by a silver needle, and a T of extremely intricate rune circles depicted inside the tray. A curious young wizard tried to touch the amulet, but found it stuck to the tray, immovable. Everyone, take out the silver needle from the tray first. Then, pierce your finger, take a drop of blood, and smear it on the amulet, Anduin instructed, demonstrating with the silver needle. After that, keep your finger on the amulet and sense the flow of magic within it. Wait for the ceremony to complete. Moles, you've practiced the training method for a month, so this shouldn't be difficult for you. Everyone nodded in understanding, even the first-year students. However, some young wizards were still apprehensive about drawing blood. Despite this, after long-term interaction and the previous dinner party, everyone had developed a basic trust in Anduin. Even Malfoy remained silent. Die-hard fans like Percy and the Weasley twins didn't hesitate to try it out for themselves. Soon, Percy was the first to press his finger, now pierced and bleeding, onto the amulet. As he did so, the rune pattern in the tray began to emit bursts of fluorescence, with the flashing frequency increasing steadily. Eventually, the magic lines were completely illuminated, and magic ripples started flowing from the outside to the inside, as if transmitting something into the talisman. End of this chapter. Chapter 671, New Attributes, asking for monthly pass recommendations. The wave-like magical ripples did not stop after converging into the amulet. They gradually spread upwards along the amulet and Percy's fingers, eventually sweeping across his entire body. However, Percy's expression remained calm, showing no signs of discomfort from the scanning ripples. After about half a minute, the magical aura on the tray gradually dimmed, and the amulet in the center fell off. Percy picked up the amulet happily, then activated it as he used to operate the old amulet, browsing the contents with great interest. Finally, he turned his light curtain towards everyone in a grand manner, displaying his data for all to see. Name: Percy Weasley. Age: 15 years old, 5th grade. Normal. Personal attributes: physique, power, dexterity, intelligence, stamina 100, mana 312 ticks, combat rating 371. Casting ability: polymorph 3rd level, disarming curse 3rd level, banishing spell 3rd level, remaining spells 32 items. Expand. Study results: 4th grade transfiguration O, 4th grade charms O, 4th grade potions O. Expand. Honor: elected as head boy at Gryffindor House in year par. Copy evaluation: violation record none. Percy's impressive attributes immediately attracted the attention of the young wizards. They noticed some new elements on the panel compared to the old amulets, such as the newly appeared stamina value, combat power evaluation, and the number of remaining spells under the casting ability column. The dungeon evaluation also puzzled everyone. Harry and his friends exchanged glances when they saw the word dungeon. They had heard of this term before, knowing that there was a number 1 dungeon hidden in the abyss at the end of the 4th floor of Hogwarts. They wondered if the panel's content was related to this. Before they could ponder further, all the young wizards at the scene began to perform the blood ritual, clearly intrigued by the data Percy had shown. Naturally, Harry and his friends were eager to see the changes in their attributes as well. After everyone took their turn, they found that the blood ritual was quite simple, just shedding some blood and waiting for a while. It didn't take long for everyone to complete their ceremony and bind the new amulet. Harry and his friends couldn't wait to browse their attributes. Name: Harry Potter. Age: 11 years old, 1st grade. Status: normal. Personal attributes: physique, strength, dexterity, intelligence, stamina 100, mana 90 ticks, combat rating 102. Casting ability: levitation spell 2nd rank, luminous charm 2nd level, polymorph 1st level, remaining spells 7 items. Study results: Nonner. Seeker for the Gryffindor House Quidditch team in the 1st year. Copy evaluation: no violation record, none. Seeing that his condition had finally improved from malnutrition, Harry couldn't help but smile. All his attributes had improved, at least reaching the average level. Ron, let me see your stats. Have they improved a lot? Harry asked, showing his stats to Ron, and then moving his head to Ron's side. In terms of improvement, it seems to be a little bit, but not much. Is this new system really accurate? I thought my strength would be higher, Ron said, scratching his head in embarrassment before turning his panel to Harry. Name: Ron Weasley. Age: 11 years old, 1st grade, status normal. Personal attributes: physique, strength, dexterity, intelligence, stamina 100, mana 99 ticks, combat rating 105. Casting ability: levitation spell 2nd rank, restoration spell 1st level, polymorph 1st level. Among the previous attributes, Ron had only increased his physique and intelligence by half a star, which left him a bit disappointed. He thought he had worked hard during this period, so why hadn't his strength and agility improved? It's okay, Ron. Maybe your stats will change soon. Don't be discouraged. Harry softly comforted his friend. After all, most of Ron's attributes were much higher than his own. Afterwards, Harry and Ron compared their attribute panels with Neville, and Ron felt somewhat relieved because Neville's changes were even smaller than his. Name: Neville Longbottom. Age: 11 years old. 1st status: normal. Personal attributes: physique, strength, agility, intelligence, stamina 100, mana 105. Combat rating 17. Casting ability: levitation spank, restoration spell, level 1, luminous charm, level 1. It's a pity. My intelligence has finally been raised to 1 star, but my spell levels are not as high as yours, Neville said, a little embarrassed, but not very disappointed. Intelligence had always been the attribute he cared about the most, and he was happy to have improved to a normal level. Hermione, what about your attributes and levels? You cast so many spells, so your spell levels must be very high. After checking on Neville, Harry and Ron turned their attention to Hermione. They were very curious about her data, as Hermione had the best grasp of spells among them. It's okay, it's not as good as I imagined, Hermione said, showing her panel with a hint of arrogance. Name, Hermione Granger. Age, 11 years old, first year. Status, normal. Personal attributes, physique, strength, agility, intelligence, stamina, 100-100, mana, 102. Combat rating, 108. Casting ability, levitation spell, 2nd rank. Restoration spell, level 2. Luminous charm, level 2. What? Did you make a mistake? Why are all your stats higher than mine? Ron looked at Hermione's panel with disbelief. He couldn't understand why Hermione's intelligence, spell levels, and even agility were higher than his. That's because you didn't work hard enough. Even when I go back to the dormitory, I practice spells by myself. My intelligence was only 1.5 stars, and it was only recently upgraded. But my levitation spell still isn't at level 3, Hermione teased Ron, though she looked worriedly at her spell levels. Most of her spells had been upgraded to level 2, but none had reached level 3. Aren't you satisfied with that? Ron rolled his eyes, feeling more upset as Hermione pressed his head hard. On the other side, Malfoy was also checking his own panel with great interest. He had been quietly training to join the Tactics Club, and the results were satisfactory to him. Name, Draco Malfoy. Age, 11 years old, first year. Status, normal. Personal attributes, physique, strength, agility, intelligence, stamina, 100-100. Mana, 103-103. Combat rating, 106. Casting ability, levitation spell, 2nd rank. Leg locking curse, level 2. Dancing charm, level 1. Since the young wizards had just entered school, the gap in attributes wasn't too big. As for the level of magic spells, since the levitation spell involved specific training methods, everyone's level was similar. The number of existing spells could show their usual practice results. After seeing that everyone had basically checked their own data, Anduin interrupted. Okay, let's study our respective attributes and data in more detail later. For now, I want to briefly introduce the new columns on the data panel. Everyone immediately focused their attention, clearly interested in the new content on the panel. A new feature called physical value has been added, and the magic value now also shows the consumption column. This data can only be displayed by the advanced version of the Silver Flash amulet that has undergone the blood ritual. The stamina value displayed above represents your physical endurance. Everyone's full value is 100 points, which will decrease after strenuous exercise or training, Anduin explained. It's important to note that the better your physical fitness, the slower your stamina will decline after intense exercise. Conversely, if your fitness is poor, your stamina will deplete more quickly. Stamina will gradually recover with time, rest, and proper nutrition. Having 100 points of stamina doesn't mean you can waste it recklessly. When your stamina drops below 30 points, you enter the danger zone. At 20 points, you'll start experiencing symptoms of fatigue. If it falls below 10 points, it means you've collapsed, with common symptoms including shock, pale complexion, and sweating, which can be life-threatening. This column is designed to assist you in training, so you must always monitor your system during your usual training process. Once your stamina drops below 30 points, you must stop immediately to avoid harm, Anduin continued. On the other hand, if your remaining stamina is greater than 30 points, it means the training intensity is insufficient. I can see your data, so do you understand what I mean? Anduin looked around at the crowd meaningfully. The young wizards present swallowed involuntarily at his words. They couldn't help but think that this meant they should push themselves every day until their stamina reached 30 points. Initially, it sounded like a lot of precautions and dangers, but how could they tire themselves out under normal circumstances? They didn't fully understand what the extreme value of 30 points meant, but they had a bad feeling about it. Seeing everyone's reactions, Anduin nodded in satisfaction. The mana values work the same way as physical strength. The mana consumed will be reflected on the panel in real time. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 and 72. The Limiter. Anduin's cold voice echoed through the room. There is no extreme limit to magic power, but when it is completely consumed, it will bring a strong sense of discomfort to the body, and physical stamina will also decrease. In short, the side effects are not severe, so your daily goal is to deplete your magic power until there is nothing left. Of course, don't overdo it. Understand? Anduin's stern gaze swept over the group. Understood. Everyone responded weakly. When it came to mana, Anduin didn't hold back. He directly ordered everyone to drain their mana daily. If it weren't for his final cautionary note, the young wizards might have thought he intended to exhaust them to death. But seeing the slightly dangerous glint in Anduin's eyes, no one dared to complain. As for the new data point, combat strength evaluation, it is a reference value calculated by a special algorithm based on your physical fitness, attributes, and spell levels. When the attributes of the lower grades do not exceed 2 stars, and the spell level does not exceed 2, the bonus isn't significant, so you'll find that your numbers are about the same. But as you grow older, learn more spells, and become stronger, there will be a significant difference in combat effectiveness compared to other lazy wizards. Of course, a higher combat power evaluation doesn't necessarily mean stronger combat power. It also depends on specific actions in battle. Use it as a reference. As for the dungeon evaluation column, you don't need to know too much at the moment. The new Silver Flash Talisman is an important tool to assist everyone in training. I will monitor your training results daily and provide unified feedback. I hope you won't let me down. Anduin grinned, but his smile was full of malice in the eyes of the young wizards, making everyone shudder. The thought of being watched every day was unsettling. Many began to doubt if joining the tactical club was a good idea. Just as everyone was filled with worry, Anduin revealed another significant tool. He took out a metal ring with a simple design and showed it to everyone. In addition to the advanced version of the system, I have prepared a third club benefit for you. The Limiter. Limiter? What's that? The young wizards looked at the item in Anduin's hands curiously. Could it be another legendary tool? Getting 2 legendary items upon joining the club would be fantastic. The Limiter is a practical auxiliary device for daily training. It has 5 settings. First gear is the lowest, and 5th gear is the highest. Each additional gear imposes a certain restrictive effect on the body. The first gear, the easiest, will slightly suppress your magic power output efficiency, making it more difficult to cast spells. However, with long-term use and adaptation, it can speed up the growth of magic power sensitivity and improve spell levels. The second and third gears are more restrictive than the first, with better effects. Starting from the 4th gear, in addition to suppressing magic power output, there will also be a weight-bearing effect. The 4th gear increases your body weight by 20%, and the 5th gear by 50%. Which gear to use depends on your needs. In simple terms, the faster you want to improve, the harder you must work to adapt to the higher gear of the Limiter. Anduin briefly introduced the device, then distributed another 20 pieces to everyone. What? After receiving the so-called Limiter, the young wizards couldn't help but look at Anduin with consternation. They had thought it was a beneficial tool, but it turned out to be another challenge, to stifle their creativity. Instead, he decided to observe how they would handle the situation. The students were still adjusting to their new limiters, each reacting differently to the sudden change in their physical state. Harry, after his initial discomfort, found himself growing accustomed to the sensation. He could feel the subtle pressure, but it no longer felt overwhelming. The Weasley twins, however, were a different story. Their adventurous spirits led them to push the limits, quite literally. George's experience with the 5th gear had been a harsh lesson, and Fred's curiosity was tempered by his brother's near-crushing experience. Hermione, ever the voice of reason, provided a scientific explanation that helped everyone understand the mechanics behind the limiters. The professor's design is ingenious, she said, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of discovery. By increasing your own gravity by 1.5 times, it forces your entire body to adapt and strengthen. It's not just about adding weight, it's about enhancing your overall resilience. George, still rubbing his wrist where the bracelet had been, nodded thoughtfully. I get it now. It's like training every muscle, not just the obvious ones. Fred, always quick to see the practical side, grinned. So, if we can handle this, we'll be stronger than ever. But let's not go overboard again, okay? Harry, feeling a bit more confident, adjusted his bracelet to the second gear. The sensation was manageable, and he could feel his body working harder to compensate. This could actually be useful, he mused aloud. If we can get used to it, we'll be in great shape for anything. Anduin, watching from a distance, felt a sense of satisfaction. The students were beginning to understand the purpose behind the limiters. They were not just tools of torture, but instruments of growth. He had designed them to push the students beyond their perceived limits, to make them stronger and more resilient. As the students continued to experiment with their limiters, Anduin approached the group. Remember, he said, his voice calm and authoritative, these limiters are not just for physical training. They are meant to help you understand your own limits and how to surpass them. Use them wisely, and you will find yourselves growing stronger in ways you never imagined. The students nodded, their initial apprehension giving way to determination. They were ready to embrace the challenge, to push themselves beyond their comfort zones. Anduin's words had ignited a spark within them, a desire to become the best versions of themselves. As the day progressed, the students continued to experiment with their limiters, each finding their own balance. The initial fear and discomfort were replaced by a sense of purpose and excitement. They were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they had the tools and the guidance to succeed. Anduin looked around the crowd and said loudly, "All right, everyone should have tried the limiter in their hands. Are you satisfied with its effect?" The young wizards exchanged embarrassed glances. To say they were satisfied would be a lie. The limiter felt like a shackle, uncomfortable and restrictive. Yet to claim it was ineffective would be equally untrue. The device's power was undeniable, perhaps even comparable to legendary artifacts. "Professor, can using this limiter for training really make our attributes upgrade faster?" asked Penello, a fifth-year student from Ravenclaw. She had just tried setting the limiter to level 3, only to find her magic flow severely obstructed. Spells she could previously cast with ease, even without a wand, were now impossible. The sensation of being weakened was deeply unsettling. If it weren't for Anduin's endorsement, she might have suspected it was a cruel instrument of torture or a prank item from a joke shop. Anduin smiled slightly at her question. He then unbuttoned his cuff and revealed his left arm to everyone. There is no doubt about its effect. This is not a newly developed product. The wizard stared in astonishment at Anduin's exposed arm. Around his not-so-thick wrist was a long string of bracelets identical to the limiters they held. There were at least 7 or 8 of them. If one didn't know better, they might mistake them for an ancient arm guard. Do you usually wear so many limiters?" Penello asked, swallowing in fear. She had experienced the power of a limiter set to Leve, L5, which was already terrifying. The thought of Anduin wearing multiple limiters was beyond comprehension. End of this chapter. Chapter 673, Cultivation Plan. "It's not as scary as you imagine," Anduin said with a calm smile, rolling his sleeves back down. "Once you get used to them, they won't be a burden. In fact, they'll provide a sense of stability." He continued, "I won't force you to use the limiter, but it can significantly increase your training efficiency. If you want to become stronger quickly, it will be your best ally. The only requirement from my side is that when you use the delayed training method, every night, you activate at least one limiter. If you have the conditions, you can decide whether to upgrade." Anduin's expression turned teasing. "To be honest, I'm curious to see the difference between those who use the limiter consistently and those who use it intermittently. This is experimental data we've never collected before." Hearing this, everyone shuddered involuntarily. It seemed Professor Wilson had let something slip. The little wizards exchanged glances. Although they were initially repelled by the idea of such intense training, the thought of others getting ahead of them sparked a competitive spirit. They were companions in the club, but also competitors. Anduin noticed the change in their expressions and knew he had achieved his goal. How you arrange your training is up to you. I'm not your nanny. Tactical training isn't a discipline that can make you reach the sky in one step. Achieving higher accomplishments requires self-discipline. If there's nothing else, you can all disband. Remember to gather in my office at the same time every week. Hog will bring you here. Also, starting from the next class, it won't be as easy as today. Be prepared. Yes, Professor, they chorused. Today's tactical club gathering had been an eye-opener. Although Anduin's welfare and requirements were both painful and rewarding, everyone was satisfied with what they had learned. After leaving Anduin's ranch and returning to Hogwarts, other students were eager to know about their experience in the Tactics Club. However, Anduin's confidentiality contract was no joke. The little wizards found themselves unable to share any details, no matter how much they wanted to boast. With the new knowledge from the Tactics Club, everyone began to test the new silver flash amulet, curious about its impact on their physical strength and mana. But after just the morning exercise the next day, many felt Anduin's malice. Merlin's beard. Did I only use up 10 points of stamina after running? I feel like I'm about to die of exhaustion. Ron, drenched in sweat, checked his system in the auditorium. Frustrated. It's unbelievable, Harry said, his expression grim. I've only consumed 12 points. If this keeps up, using up to 30 points will be harder than I thought. Is the professor sure the danger limit is 30 and not 50? I'm worse off than you guys. I only spent 6 points, Neville muttered helplessly, looking at his panel. Don't forget that physical strength recovers with time and eating, Hermione reminded them, frowning. Our stamina might be fully recovered by the afternoon. Can we really consume 70 points in a day? Then, what should we do? Professor Wilson is still staring at us. It's only been a day since we came back from the tactical club. Could it be that we can't complete the task he assigned? Harry looked at everyone with a worried expression. Maybe we have to think of other ways, Hermione said, clearly troubled. She then turned her head to look at Neville beside her. By the way, do you know what kind of training can quickly consume physical strength? Exhausting stamina quickly. Neville scratched his head and thought for a moment. If you mean the most tiring training at Uncle Wilson's, it has to be the Zama Step. Zama Step? What kind of training is that? Harry and the others asked curiously. It's just keeping a strange posture and then not moving. It's really tiring. I've only tried it a few times at my uncle's, Neville said, recalling some painful memory, his expression freezing instantly. We have to try whatever we can. Otherwise, we will all suffer if we can't complete the professor's task, Hermione said decisively. She was not willing to fall behind, especially at the beginning. Okay then, after the afternoon class is over, let's go to the exercise room and I'll teach you, Neville nodded helplessly. If it wasn't necessary, he didn't really want to try this training method, but seeing Hermione's firm expression, he could only nod in response. While they were discussing enthusiastically, they didn't notice that someone else had overheard their conversation. It was Malfoy, who was also worried about the training. That stupid big guy seems to know some special training method. Should I take a peek? Malfoy thought secretly, then made up his mind. He didn't want to be left behind by these guys. In order to complete the tasks assigned by the tactical club, these students took a path that even Anduin hadn't thought of. In fact, in Anduin's calculations, these little wizards were unlikely to complete the tasks he set. His words were actually meant to induce everyone to train, serving as an alternative method of supervision. If they really wanted to complete it, they should rely on the weight of the limiter for training. A 20% weight gain is actually not as scary as a 50% weight gain. Even low-level wizards can bear it, but the process would be more painful. But he didn't expect that among these little wizards, there would be someone as determined as Hermione. This kind of almost masochistic training pressure aroused her competitiveness. Because they had seen the consequences of George playing with the limiter to death, Harry and the others subconsciously believed that they could only bear the low-level limit and did not intend to use this prop to assist physical training. When Anduin learned from Hogner that these little devils had gone to the training room to practice stances and ended up making themselves unable to stand up, he couldn't help but laugh. So Harry and the others just followed Neville and stood in the stance for more than half an hour? Anduin raised his eyebrows in surprise. Novice stances usually last for 10 minutes at most. He found it hard to believe these brats could do this. Of course, it wasn't a one-off. Hog said, giving Anduin a vivid account. Ron and Harry were exhausted after standing for less than 5 minutes. Hermione is a tough girl, but she persisted for 8 minutes. Only Neville could stand for 10 minutes at a time. But Hermione showed her stubborn temper again. She forced everyone to continue practicing after the break until they were too tired to stand up. Is that so? Hermione Granger, with such firm determination, it's no wonder her talent for casting spells is so good. Anduin nodded thoughtfully. He had been monitoring these little wizards through the background of Hog and the Silver Flash Talisman, observing and tapping into their potential. He wanted to determine. The future training direction for these children was becoming clearer to Anduin. He had observed that the 4 small groups that often gathered each had their own unique strengths. For instance, Neville had a lower sensitivity to magical power, which resulted in a good reserve of magic, but slower progress in casting spells. However, Neville possessed remarkable physical fitness. This was not only due to the training he received from Anduin before entering school, but also because of his grandmother's long-term care and his own natural talent. From the very beginning, Anduin decided to train Neville as a melee wizard. Harry, on the other hand, presented a different case. Initially, his physical fitness was relatively poor, but after a month of nutritional supplements and exercise, he had reached the level of a normal wizard. What truly surprised Anduin was Harry's extraordinary sensitivity to magic, which was unusually high and beyond the normal range. Anduin speculated that this might be due to Lily's protective spell, which could have endowed Harry with such heightened magical sensitivity. However, after a period of observation, Anduin realized that the situation was more complex. Despite Harry's exceptional sensitivity to magic, his progress in learning magic was quite normal, which was paradoxically abnormal. To master magic, 3 elements are essential: magical power, willpower, and determination. Although Harry's magical power was not exceptionally high, it did not hinder his ability to learn spells. In terms of willpower, emotion, and determination, Harry was on par with, if not superior to, his peers. Anduin was confident that no one in the 1st or even the 2nd grade had higher magical sensitivity than Harry. Yet, despite these excellent qualities, Harry's progress in learning magic was only slightly ahead of Ron's, which was puzzling. It seemed as if some part of Harry's intellectual attributes did not belong to him, but were borrowed from someone else. Therefore, although Anduin continued to observe Harry, he still had no definitive answers. There might be more secrets hidden within this child than he had initially imagined. End of this chapter. Chapter 674. Planning. Anduin was certain of one thing about Harry. He had a remarkable talent for lightning magic, even reaching the level of using wild thunder. This discovery surprised Anduin greatly. He had tested both Neville and Ginny, but neither of them could handle wild thunder. Therefore, Anduin's training plan for Harry remained focused on developing him as a battle wizard specializing in lightning magic. As for Ron, he seemed relatively ordinary, with no outstanding strengths, but also no glaring weaknesses. This balance was rare, and from a technical and tactical perspective, Anduin considered Ron's well-rounded abilities potentially more comprehensive than those of Neville and Harry. Hermione, who wasn't originally part of his training plan, continually surprised him. She was like an enhanced version of Ron, with satisfactory physical fitness and good magical sensitivity. What set her apart was her strong psychological resilience, excellent willpower, determination, competitive spirit, and hard-working mentality. Over the past month, Hermione had shown the most improvement among the first-year students. She had self-studied and mastered more than a dozen spells, most of which were 2-level spells, and had improved her intelligence attribute to Park-Length. Seeing Hermione reminded Anduin of his younger self, recognizing her great potential. Despite having no direct connection with her, he felt compelled to seriously cultivate her talents. Very well, although their blind training is a bit chaotic, it's not bad at all. Let's continue to observe for a while and not disturb them, Anduin chuckled softly. However, something interesting happened during their training, Hog grinned. Draco, the little wizard from Slytherin, followed them sneakily and stayed nearby, peeping at their training. In the end, he even imitated Harry and the others in their horse stance. It was quite amusing. Draco? Anduin nodded thoughtfully. He had no prejudice against Draco, but given that Draco came from a Death Eater family, it was unrealistic to view him differently. However, if Draco showed more potential in the future, Anduin considered the possibility of training him and using him as a tool to subvert the pureblood wizards. Anduin shook his head, suddenly vigilant. Why did he instinctively plan a conspiracy? He had already decided to focus on nurturing these juniors and exploring the mysteries of emotional magic upon returning to Hogwarts. He also intended to take a big vacation to treat himself for the emotional deficiency caused by long-term killing. Yet, he still involuntarily thought about his interests. Wasn't this going backwards? Seeing Anduin frowning as if pondering a difficult problem, Hog couldn't help but mutter, "My lord, what are you thinking? Is there something wrong with this Malfoy? He's crazy, but it doesn't seem like he has a lot of heart and eyes." "It's nothing, just thinking about how to train these brats." Anduin shook his head indifferently, not revealing his concerns. "Then why didn't you get to know Harry earlier?" Hog tilted his head, puzzled. "You have such a good relationship with him, but you just observe silently from behind." "It's not urgent now." Anduin smiled slightly. "Harry has been out of our sight for so long, and no one knows his current state of mind. Contacting him rashly might have the opposite effect." Hog nodded in understanding. He knew that Anduin was notoriously cautious. "What about Quirrell? Since he knew there was a problem, why didn't he take any action against him? Isn't this similar to what you did in the past?" "Quirrell will be handed over to Dumbledore, as per our agreement," Anduin replied, squinting his eyes and sneering. "I also want to use Quirrell to gauge what the old man is thinking. He seems to have a different opinion of Harry. I have my suspicions. I knew this old guy was very cunning when I was in school. We don't need to worry about him." "Aren't you afraid that Quirrell might do something wrong?" Hog asked worriedly. "What if he's ordered by Voldemort to harm the young wizards?" "Don't worry. I've secretly recorded the coordinates on Harry and the others. If anything abnormal happens, I'll be there immediately," Anduin reassured. "However," he added, "maybe we should give him some warnings. Prepare yourself, and we can consider starting that plan soon." "Understood, my lord," Hog grinned. "I've long wanted to make a scene at Hogwarts." After trying it out, Harry and his friends quickly developed a deep fear of the Zama step training method. By the next day, they couldn't even stand upright. They couldn't fathom how someone could invent such a torturous method. What made it worse was that in the new week's tactical training class, Anduin had actually included the stand in the course content. Although Anduin said he would let the young wizards torment themselves, he was still concerned that random training might cause injuries. Incorrect posture while standing could lead to hidden injuries. Therefore, he thoughtfully moved the content of the fighting class forward a bit, starting the whole first grade on a journey of suffering. In addition to this basic training method, the main subject was fighting, divided into weaponry and unarmed combat. During class, Anduin made the young wizards wear protective pads to resist blows and practice with rattan swords or sticks, letting them spar with each other. For wizards, melee combat isn't a reasonable choice, and Anduin didn't expect everyone to use these skills in the future. The main purpose of learning fighting was, on one hand, part of physical training, as fighting consumes a lot of energy. On the other hand, it was to train their comprehensive abilities, such as reaction, pace, and resistance to blows. It also honed their willpower, softening the previous single training items. The most important aspect was to get them used to a confrontational atmosphere. Learning to fight shouldn't just involve shooting targets or punching sandbags. However, letting them use spells to shoot at each other could lead to problems, as many young wizards couldn't even recite spells correctly. If someone accidentally cast the wrong spell, it could cause trouble. Direct confrontation among the young wizards could also lead to unhappiness. For example, during rehearsals, two people might get angry and end up as enemies. Among the first-year students, Gryffindor and Slytherin often caused such conflicts. Their sparring sessions frequently turned into fights, sometimes even gang fights. Surprisingly, Professor Wilson didn't turn a blind eye to these situations, but was quite lenient. Every time the two groups fought, he would eventually step in to stop it. Sometimes, Anduin seemed interested in watching the spectacle, but the rest of the students couldn't be punished. The reason Anduin was so calm was, Anduin wasn't worried about the young wizards getting injured. He had prepared comprehensive protective measures. The protective gear was genuine alchemy equipment, designed to shield them from head to toe. During their confrontations, they would experience real pain but no bruises. Feeling pain was, in fact, part of the training. Anduin also believed it was beneficial for the young wizards to vent occasionally. He knew his course had placed considerable pressure on many of them, and this was a way to release that tension. However, he wasn't concerned that allowing them to fight would escalate conflicts. He had other methods in place to teach these young wizards the importance of unity and cooperation. Through battle, they could quickly understand each other, fostering a deeper familiarity than mere companionship could achieve. In addition to daily classes, Anduin's tactical club held regular weekly training sessions. The members of this newly established club had mixed feelings. The club offered desirable benefits, with the weekly dinner being the most anticipated event for all members. However, the training was rigorous. In the club, Anduin treated all wizards equally, regardless of age, unlike in his classes. For instance, he began by teaching everyone Barnabas Funkley's 7 major spellcasting techniques. These skills didn't require advanced knowledge and could be learned by even first-year students. Although Anduin explained these techniques in an easy-to-understand manner, many young wizards still found them challenging. Anduin didn't expect them to master the skills quickly. He knew that understanding the principles was just the first step. Continuous practice was essential, and even low-level wizards could eventually learn these techniques. Since the club members were the elite of all grades, Anduin naturally had higher expectations for them. End of this chapter. Chapter 675, Treasure. Tibetan spells, compared to traction and tracking spells, multiple spells, and fast and slow spells, are relatively simple in the Barnabas Funkley's spellcasting technique, Anduin explained, his voice both instructive and commanding. They were gathered in the open space outside the ranch manor, with several human-shaped targets set up not far in front of them. The club members listened intently. The most critical aspects are the attack angle of the spell, the judgment of the enemy's line of sight, and the control over the spell, Anduin continued. In a simple application, it is essential to ensure that the spells fired later are perfectly hidden behind the first spell. To demonstrate, Anduin quickly shook his wand and fired several magic bullets in succession. They shot out in a straight line, like wild geese in autumn, and hit the human-shaped targets heavily. Each spell hit a value of about 100 points on the target, and the onlookers were pleasantly surprised. This method is most common in one-on-one wizard duels. When there is only one enemy, the field of vision is relatively narrow, and the space to maneuver is relatively large, Anduin explained. But in a multiplayer duel, this simple spellcasting technique is not enough. So, the higher-end Tibetan mantra involves hiding one spell within another. For example, consider this. Anduin released a basketball-sized drop of water, which everyone recognized as aguamenti. But when the water drop hit the target, a dozen huge ravens suddenly flew out of the exploded water ball, surrounding the target and attacking while interfering with the line of sight. Wow! The little wizards widened their eyes in amazement and showed envious expressions. The professor hid the flock of birds curse in the aguamenti spell. That's really amazing! Hermione exclaimed, eager to show off her knowledge. She had been studying extra spell knowledge to keep up with the tactical club's demands. We've seen it all, Hermione. There's no need for you to explain it to us again, Ron said, rolling his eyes. Hermione often liked to show off her knowledge in front of them. But can we really learn such a difficult technique? I still can't understand the charge charm taught last time. The professor said it was the easiest technique for casting spells, Neville muttered, looking frustrated. The professor didn't expect us to master it quickly. We just need to practice hard. I can already charge up and cast Impedimenta, Hermione said proudly. That's you, not us, Ron replied, dissatisfied. The professor always teaches advanced techniques in the club. How can we keep up? As they whispered among themselves, they noticed Harry looking pensive. Hermione asked, "What's the matter, Harry? Are you still thinking about what happened at the Quidditch game?" "Yeah," Harry nodded thoughtfully. "If it wasn't for your help, I might have been killed by Snape." Harry had just participated in his first Quidditch match as a Gryffindor Seeker 2 days ago. Professor McGonagall had even sponsored him a Nimbus 2000 broomstick a month prior. After more than a month of training, Harry had become proficient at controlling the broomstick. However, during the match against the Slytherin team, his broomstick suddenly went out of control. If it weren't for his agility from the past 2 months of training, he might have been thrown off, with potentially dire consequences. This sudden abnormal situation had made the audience in the stands anxious, especially Harry's friends Ron and Hermione. Hagrid, who was also in the stands, had noticed Harry's predicament and was equally concerned. The very powerful black magic ensured that nothing could interfere with the broomstick. This statement aroused Hermione's suspicions. Through her binoculars, she noticed Snape staring at Harry, muttering words as if cursing him. Hermione rushed to the stand where Snape was and set the hem of his robe on fire with a spell. Immediately, Harry's broom returned to normal. Since then, Hermione, Harry, and their friends began to suspect that Snape was plotting something nefarious and wanted to kill Harry to silence him. Their suspicion was further fueled by an incident the day before the Quidditch match. Snape had found Harry and his friends in the yard, and Harry was holding a copy of The Magical Quidditch Oddball. Snape improvised a rule that books from the school library were not allowed to be taken out of the school and deducted points from Gryffindor. That night, Harry decided to confront Snape to get the book back. He overheard Snape telling Filch that he had been attacked by a 3-headed dog and saw Snape's bloody leg. Snape also spotted Harry and threw him out. The group speculated that Snape might have tried to pass through the room at the end of the 4th floor and was injured by the 3-headed dog. They believed that because Harry had discovered his secret, Snape wanted to kill him. Do you think Snape will make another move? Why did he want to break into that room? Harry had been troubled by these questions for the past 2 days. Who knows? Maybe there's treasure hidden in that room. It seems that Professor Wilson set it up, so the things hidden in it might belong to him, Ron suggested, using his imagination. Professor's treasure? It could be possible. Uncle Wilson owned Silver Flash Trading Company. My grandmother said his wealth is incalculable. Maybe he hid some treasure in the school. Otherwise, why would he arrange such a scary guard? Neville still remembered the hideous 3-headed giant dog. What kind of treasure would be kept at Hogwarts? His magical and legendary items are just thrown around on the ship, Ron said, scratching his head in confusion. If it really is the professor's treasure, it must be incredible. Maybe it's a legendary item. Should we remind the professor? Harry hesitated. But we don't have any actual evidence. Will the professor believe us? I think it's better to tell him. We must not let Snape's conspiracy succeed, Hermione insisted, as she always disliked Snape for targeting Gryffindor. Okay, then let's stay after the club meeting and talk to the professor. Harry decided after thinking about it. Yeah, Ron, Hermione, and Neville nodded in agreement. What are you guys muttering about? Anduin, who was explaining the essentials of casting spells to everyone, noticed the absent-minded group of 4 and reprimanded them with some dissatisfaction. Nothing. We are just amazed at your superb teaching skills, Hermione quickly replied, realizing they had been caught. The rest of the group snickered at Hermione's poor excuse. After all, the professor had demonstrated many impressive skills before, and they were no longer as easily deterred as before. Really? After you go back, the 4 of you will write a thesis on the Tibetan curse, no shorter than 4 feet, and submit it to me at the next meeting, Anduin ordered sternly. Yes. Harry and the others replied weakly, knowing they shouldn't have whispered during class. After reprimanding them, Anduin returned to teaching the Tibetan mantra. He explained it in detail and asked a few wizards in grades 3 to 5 to practice casting spells, correcting their mistakes as they went. As the gathering was about to end, Anduin named and criticized the wizards who had been lazy in their training the previous week. Anduin's training regimen was not just a simple weekly lesson, it demanded consistent and persistent effort. While he could overlook the efforts of other young wizards, he held the club members to a much stricter standard. Thanks to the Silver Flash amulet, Anduin could monitor each member's daily training progress, ensuring no one could escape his scrutiny. Susan Bones, you failed to deplete your mana twice last week, and you only used up less than 30% of your stamina. If you don't want to fall behind, you need to pay more attention, Anduin admonished. Penelo, I understand that being a prefect is demanding, but you must persist with the daily delayed training method. You've been slacking off recently. Anduin called out names one by one, addressing each member sternly. Among the club members, only Percy, Cedric, the Weasley twins, Harry, and Malfoy consistently met their daily training requirements. The Weasley twins and Malfoy in particular surprised him. Despite their daily antics, George and Fred didn't shirk their training responsibilities, which gave Anduin a sense of relief. Malfoy's performance was even more astonishing. Anduin knew that Malfoy rarely appeared at the various training grounds, yet he still managed to complete his training quota every day. This meant Malfoy was either training in the common room or secretly in his dormitory. Malfoy always maintained an indifferent facade, often taunting others by claiming he could surpass them without training. This behavior reminded Anduin of some top students in the Muggle world who pretended to play around, but secretly studied hard at home to maintain their image of effortless genius. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 and 76, Unexpected Assignments. In Anduin's eyes, Malfoy's behavior was that of an awkward brat, full of arrogance. However, no matter what Malfoy's intentions were, his ability to maintain such self-disciplined, high-intensity training impressed Anduin. Percy, George, Fred, the three of you stay here. The rest of you are dismissed. Remember what I just told you. Since you have joined the club, you must hold yourselves to higher standards, Anduin announced, specifically naming the three Weasley brothers. Percy and the twins exchanged puzzled looks, unable to decipher why the professor wanted them to stay behind. They had worked hard to complete the training, after all. The rest of the young wizards, relieved by the disbandment, rushed out the door happily. The pressure from Anduin's formidable presence was too much for them to bear. Harry and his friends exchanged glances and, seeing Anduin announce the disbandment, decided to stay put instead of following the others. Anduin found their behavior curious, but Percy and the twins had already approached him. "Brother." "Oh no, Professor, why did you leave us behind?" Percy almost slipped, calling Anduin brother instead of professor. "It's not official business, so don't be so formal," Anduin said gently. "I need your help. Shaltir is away on a business trip, and there's a shortage of hands at the ranch." "Ranch? Do you mean?" George pointed to the enclosure where magical animals were kept. "That's right," Anduin confirmed. "I need you to come over every 3 nights to help take care of the Tebow warthogs and Ream cattle." "Ah?" Fred groaned. "I thought you wanted us for something exciting. So you just want us to work for free." The Weasley brothers were no strangers to Anduin's requests. He often had them running errands, which is why they were somewhat apprehensive. "Don't worry, I won't make you work for nothing," Anduin said, slightly annoyed. "From now on, I'll provide your dinners. Percy, you'll be my assistant during this time. There are some school matters you can help with as well." "Yes, Professor," Percy exclaimed, thrilled by the opportunity. He shot an excited look at the twins, who high-fived each other in celebration. "Long live! We'll have a big meal every day from now on." Harry and his friends, who had stayed behind, couldn't help but feel envious. Ron even raised his hand. "Professor, we can stay and help too. Can we join?" "You?" George laughed mockingly. "Do you know how to take care of magical animals? Some of them are high-risk creatures and could kill you if you're not careful." "That's right," Percy agreed. "Handling magical beasts is no joke. Besides, why are you still here? It's past curfew. You should be heading back to the common room." We. Ron and his friends looked at each other, disappointed. For Ron, the biggest attraction of the Tactics Club was the dinner. The thought of the Weasley brothers getting to eat it every day made him envious. Anduin, however, didn't immediately refuse. He held his chin thoughtfully. The reason he chose the three Weasley brothers was partly because Shaltair was away, but also because he wanted to support Percy, George, and Fred. Adding more nutrients to their growing bodies wouldn't hurt. As for Harry and his friends, based on the standard of 2 meals of magical animal meat per week, the nutrition is actually sufficient. These magical ingredients, if consumed in excess, can cause adverse effects. Anduin originally planned to gradually increase Harry and the others' nutritional intake after a year or two. However, now that they have offered to help, he pondered for a moment, weighing the potential negative consequences. Considering that these children can now complete their training goals daily, they should be able to handle the increased energy intake. All right, Anduin nodded at Ron. If you want to help, it's not impossible. Really? Ron, Harry, and the others exchanged excited glances, surprised that the professor agreed so readily. Professor, isn't this a bit inappropriate? Percy looked at Anduin with some concern. Tebow warthogs are XXXX level magical animals, and they are just as dangerous as trolls. They are only 11 years old. It doesn't matter, Anduin replied with a gentle smile. The colony of magical animals on the ranch will be under Thor's supervision. You won't be handling them directly. You'll be doing some manual labor. After speaking, Anduin whistled, and everyone felt a gust of wind sweep past them. With a sound like thunder, a huge golden thunderbird hovered above them, scanning them with sharp eyes. Is this a thunderbird? Hermione murmured, wide-eyed as she recognized the creature above them. This is Thor, Professor Wilson's companion. Didn't we meet him when we first came to the club? Neville reminded them, familiar with the creatures in Anduin's care. Did we? Harry frowned in confusion, then patted his head. Could it be that golden bird next to the red fat chicken on the card table? But the size difference is too big, right? Thor can change his body shape freely. It's not a big deal, Neville explained with a smile. And the red fat chicken you mentioned is actually a phoenix. You don't want to describe it that way in front of her. Eileen is very sensitive about her body and throws a fit whenever words like fat are mentioned. Huh? You said it was a phoenix? Both Harry and Hermione's eyes widened in disbelief. As everyone was processing this information, the Thunderbird above them flashed arcs of electricity and slowly shrank until it was the size of a lion. It then descended and affectionately rubbed its face against Anduin. All right, let Thor take care of things here, and I'll explain your tasks, Anduin said, patting the Thunderbird's shoulder with a smile and then addressing the group. After a while, Percy and the others understood what Anduin meant by job. It turned out they had to shovel manure for the magical animals. Collect all the excrement from these magical animals and transport it to the door next to the manor. On the other side is my greenhouse. These are high-quality natural fertilizers and quite precious resources, Anduin explained, pointing to a pile of feces in the distance. The group of 7 stared at the dung pile with speechless faces, finally understanding why Anduin called it an easy job. They had indeed become manual laborers. Although they were reluctant, they had agreed to help, so there was no turning back. Under Percy's leadership, they used disappearing spells and floating spells to transport the excrement. Fortunately, with the help of magic, the task wasn't too laborious, but the sheer volume of excrement from hundreds of magical animals took them many hours to handle. Merlin's beard. I'd rather be punished by Filch and clean the toilets for a week than face this disgusting task, one of them muttered, exhausted from the day's work. George clutched his stomach with a disgusted expression. So, we have to do these jobs every day? Fred sniffed his clothes and frowned in disgust. As much as I hate to admit it, it seems so. Percy shrugged. The job may be unpleasant, but it's safer than dealing directly with those Teppo warthogs, isn't it? Everyone nodded reluctantly. Fortunately, Anduin's benefits were decent. Otherwise, how could they accept this kind of work? Anduin smiled and told Percy and the twins to leave the ranch after seeing that they were busy. He then turned his attention to Harry and the others. You stayed behind because you have something to say to me, right? That's right. Harry seized the opportunity to speak. He immediately recounted to Anduin what he had seen and heard, along with the group's conjectures. Snape, seeking the treasure I hid at the end of the fourth floor? Anduin's mouth curled up slightly. To be honest, he wanted to laugh but managed to hold it back. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression Snape would have if he knew these young wizards were speculating about him like this. Yes, Professor Snape must be up to something. Professor, must be careful. Harry insisted, his mind filled with the image of Snape's perpetually gloomy face, which had long made him synonymous with villainy in Harry's eyes. Thank you very much for your concern, Anduin nodded with a smile. But you might be overthinking it. Professor Snape is not the person you imagine him to be, and while there is indeed something hidden at the end of the fourth floor, it's not my treasure. What's hidden there are the secrets of Headmaster Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. It's better if you don't know too much about it. End of this chapter. Chapter 677, The Black Demon Mark. After leaving Anduin's ranch, Harry and his friends walked back to the common room with disappointed expressions. Professor Wilson had ultimately refused to listen to their concerns, insisting that Snape would not do anything to endanger Harry. Not even the fact that Snape had cursed Harry during the Quidditch match could change Professor Wilson's opinion. From Anduin, they also learned that there was indeed something hidden in the room at the end of the fourth floor, but it seemed to be related to Dumbledore, not Professor Wilson, as they had previously imagined. What should we do? The professor doesn't seem to be wary of Snape at all, but we all know he has evil intentions, Harry said, scratching his head in distress. I really don't know what the professor is thinking. It's obvious that someone is coveting the things hidden in that room, but he doesn't care, Ron complained, equally perplexed. But did you hear what the professor said? The things hidden in that room are related to Headmaster Dumbledore and someone named Nicholas Flamel, Hermione interjected, rolling her eyes thoughtfully. Do you know who Nicholas Flamel is? Harry, Ron, and Neville shook their heads in unison. Perhaps if we find out who this mysterious person is, we can understand what Snape is planning. Then we can warn the professor again and prevent Snape's conspiracy from succeeding. Hermione suggested, her eyes lighting up with determination. That's a good idea, Harry nodded in approval. But there's only one name. Where should we start? Hermione pondered for a moment. The person who can be related to Headmaster Dumbledore must be a well-known wizard. Let's start looking in the library. The rest of the group knew there was no other way, so they nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Anduin, who had sent the young wizards away, had returned to his residence on the Leona. He was frowning, deep in thought. What's the matter, my lord? Did you encounter any troubles? Hog, who was resting nearby, looked at Anduin curiously. It's Quirrell. That guy is looking for trouble, Anduin said, narrowing his eyes with an unfriendly expression. He tried to cast a spell on Harry's broom during the Quidditch match. I didn't expect him to be so bold, daring to attack a student in public. Are you referring to the accident that happened 2 days ago? Hog asked, scratching his head in confusion. Didn't Snape take care of it at the time? It seems Quirrell didn't succeed in the end. Otherwise, we would have been alarmed. But his actions are becoming more audacious. Who gave him such confidence? Anduin mused, seeing something deeper behind Quirrell's actions. It's time to put a stop to his antics. Then you mean, to start that plan? Hog raised his brows. I thought you were going to wait for a while. Didn't you say that Quirrell would be watched by Dumbledore? But the old man seems to be a bit negligent. It's time to warn him. Let's do it tomorrow, just in time to give them a big gift before Christmas, Anduin said, tapping the desk in front of him with his fingers. No problem. Hog stood up excitedly. I'll get ready now. With that, Hog rushed out of the room, clearly excited. Anduin, still at the desk, turned his head to look towards the direction of Hogwarts Castle, deep in thought. The next day, after finishing their herbology class in the morning, the first-year wizards were leisurely walking from the greenhouse to the main tower of the castle. Hogwarts had already begun to enter winter, and the Christmas holiday was just 2 weeks away. Although it hadn't started to snow yet, the teachers and students at the school had already donned thick winter clothes. Among these little wizards, the anticipation for the upcoming holiday was palpable. Hermione stood out among her friends, holding a transparent glass bottle containing a small, enchanting blue flame. She had discovered her talent for controlling flames and had created this little gadget in her spare time. Although it wasn't an alchemical item, it was more than sufficient for heating. Hermione was particularly fond of this blue magical flame, even using it to light Snape's cauldron once. The wind outside was fierce today, making everyone shiver and causing Hermione to clutch the flame vial even tighter. Ron and the others were still chatting beside her. The jumping bulbs in Professor Sprout's greenhouse don't seem as impressive as what we saw at Professor Wilson's place last night. Is it because of that Tepper warthog manure? Ron mused, recalling the previous night's events. Can you stop being so disgusting? Hermione shot him a reproachful glance. We're about to have lunch. Don't keep talking about those things. After we got back last night, I had to use 7 or 8 Scourgify spells to get rid of that awful smell. But don't we have to do dirty work tonight? We should get used to it, Ron replied nonchalantly. You idiot, Hermione snapped, irritated that Ron would bring this up before eating. She slapped him on the back. Didn't you notice that the compost was obviously hoarded for a while? There's no way there would be that much every day. We either carry it every few days or clean it up a little bit each day. Is that so? I thought we had to work as hard every day as we did last night, Ron said, relieved. No wonder the professor only asked Percy and the others at first. I thought he wanted to torture them. Do you think everyone is as dense as you? Hermione retorted, dissatisfied. Harry and Neville couldn't help but giggle at the exchange. This was a common occurrence for them. Do you feel that it's extraordinarily cold today? Ron asked, trying to change the subject. He pointed to the sky. The weather was indeed colder than the previous days, even though it wasn't the time for a weather change, nor had it started to snow. The sky was filled with low, dark clouds, but it didn't look like it was about to thunder or rain. Everyone looked up at the sky, feeling that something was off, but unable to pinpoint what it was. Just as they were about to return to the main tower, a sudden change occurred. Bone reappears. A sharp, dark incantation echoed in their ears, like a lizard whispering beside them. A dark green spell shot out from nowhere, rose straight into the sky, and exploded. The spell transformed into a green light, tumbling in midair until it formed a strange, magical image. It was an enormous skeleton composed of countless green star-like particles, with a large python protruding from its mouth like a tongue. The image rose higher and higher, glowing brightly against the black clouds, resembling a new constellation. Within moments, the image was visible above Hogwarts, seen by all teachers and students. What? What is that? Harry, who was just outside the castle, widened his eyes in horror and murmured. Malfoy, also in the crowd, blushed with excitement and roared involuntarily. Dark Mark! This must be the Dark Mark! Father mentioned it to me once, and it is exactly as described. The Dark Mark. What is that? A group of young wizards, including Harry and his friends, looked at the yelling Malfoy in bewilderment. This was the first time they had heard of it. That's the symbol of the Dark Lord, Malfoy explained with a slightly trembling voice. When the Dark Lord was still alive, whenever the Death Eaters killed someone, they would leave a black mark above the corpse or the house. It's a magical mark, the symbol of the Dark Lord whose name cannot be spoken. Oh my God! This is simply terrifying. Hermione wrinkled her face in disgust. But why did such a mark appear at Hogwarts? Could it be someone's prank? It doesn't seem like it. This can't be a prank at all. Malfoy swallowed hard. No one dares to make fun of the Dark Lord's symbol. It's an ominous sign. Could it be? Malfoy hesitated. Could it be that the Dark Lord has really returned? Malfoy trembled involuntarily, partly out of fear and partly out of excitement. He had grown up listening to stories about Voldemort. In the yes of Malfoy's father and his pure-blood relatives, the Dark Lord was powerful, invincible, and synonymous with pure-blood glory. Influenced by these stories, Malfoy naturally had a trace of admiration for the Dark Lord. Seeing the Dark Mark made him a little excited. But at the same time, Malfoy knew that the Dark Lord also represented cruelty, darkness, and power. As an 11-year-old wizard, he instinctively rejected these things, so he was subconsciously afraid of the Dark Lord's return. End of this chapter. Chapter 678, The Black Wizard. No matter how conflicted Malfoy felt at this moment, the dark mark in the sky had already appeared before everyone. This ominous symbol continuously sent dangerous signals to the outside world, causing everyone at Hogwarts who saw it to feel a trace of inexplicable panic. In Hogwarts Castle, Quirrell, in the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office, was lying by the window, staring dumbfounded at the dark mark in the sky. "What's going on, Master? Could this be your arrangement?" Quirrell's voice echoed in the empty office, as if he were speaking to some illusory figure. "You ask me. Who do I ask?" A hoarse voice, like a snake hissing, slowly sounded in Quirrell's ear, revealing the speaker's own confusion. The situation was perplexing. His possession of Quirrell was a top secret, known only to him. Moreover, he was aware that the dark mark in the sky had nothing to do with him. In his current weakened state, it was impossible for him to do something so blatant. So, who could have done this? Even the owner of the voice began to doubt his own understanding. Could it be one of his former followers? But launching the dark mark at Hogwarts at noon seemed like the act of someone with a serious mental illness. Was this person planning to attack the school? What should we do now? Quirrell was the most nervous after seeing the signal in the sky. Ever since he had fallen into darkness, he had been constantly worried. Now, his body was inextricably linked with Voldemort. If Dumbledore or Anduin discovered him, he would be doomed. Especially Anduin. Quirrell recalled his experiences abroad. His former apprentice was not as kind as he appeared. In the Dark World, Anduin had once wiped out an entire vampire family. If he caught Quirrell, even with Voldemort by his side, escape might be impossible. Put away your cowardly thoughts. Voldemort, who was possessing Quirrell, could clearly sense his thoughts. Seeing Quirrell so afraid of a wizard in his early 20s made him furious. "Sorry, Master. Please forgive me." Quirrell suddenly felt a sharp pain in his brain, knowing that his master was angry. He hurriedly begged for mercy. "Now, wait and see what happens. Don't be frightened by such a sudden incident. Your current task is still to remain undercover. Focus on the Philosopher's Stone. And that damn Potter," Voldemort reiterated coldly, his hateful voice piercing Quirrell's brain like a spike. Meanwhile, everyone else at Hogwarts was also at a loss, staring at the mark in the distant sky. "Professor Snape, please contact Dumbledore immediately. The rest of you, notify all the students at once. I will go and see what's happening outside." Professor McGonagall, who was sitting at the faculty table in the Great Hall, looked at the dark mark outside the window. Nervously gripping the seat beside her, she forced herself to perform her duties calmly. The other professors did not hesitate and immediately acted according to McGonagall's instructions. They quickly gathered the students in the Great Hall, telling them to stop lunch immediately. Using magic, they put away the 4 long tables, allowing the students to gather in the hall. It was clear that the professors planned to turn the Great Hall into a temporary shelter to concentrate all the students in one place. After organizing the students, several professors rushed out of the Great Hall and dispersed after a brief discussion. They needed to find everyone and ensure their safety. The depths of his heart, feeling the weight of the situation. Students who had placed orders as soon as possible were now scattered throughout the castle, taking advantage of the break time. Professor McGonagall, after rushing out of the auditorium, did not act hastily. Instead, she found a safe place to summon her Patronus. She intended to use the Patronus charm to notify Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, about the appearance of the dark mark at Hogwarts. Even if it turned out to be a prank, the Aurors would need to intervene. Meanwhile, Snape wasted no time. He sprinted to the 8th floor, taking 3 steps at a time and using magic to leap over several moving staircases. When he reached the headmaster's office, he didn't bother with formalities and burst in unannounced. Although Snape usually had the right to enter freely, he would typically announce his arrival. Today, however, he was in a hurry. The sudden appearance of the dark mark had dredged up long-buried memories of his time as a Death Eater. Upon entering the office, Snape scanned the room for Dumbledore and soon spotted the old man standing by the window, watching the ominous sign in the sky with great interest. "Why are you still in the mood to watch?" Snape demanded, finding Dumbledore's calm demeanor infuriating. Dumbledore had already noticed Snape's presence, but remained composed. He even joked, "This dark mark is remarkably similar to the one in my memory. No, it's exactly the same. What do you think, Severus?" "Now is not the time for jokes. The dark mark has appeared in the school. We need to act quickly. No one knows what this means. It could very well indicate the presence of him," Snape said, his face darkening. In his mind, only the old man before him could handle the worst-case scenario. As for Anduin, although Snape had never underestimated him, he still saw Anduin as too young. Despite being a master alchemist and a shrewd businessman, Anduin might not be equipped to deal with an opponent of the Dark Lord's caliber. "Don't panic. There's no immediate danger," Dumbledore said, his gaze still fixed on the mark. "To be honest, even I didn't expect such a grand display." "Him?" Snape echoed, catching on to Dumbledore's implication. "Are you saying Anduin did this? He cast the dark mark at Hogwarts in broad daylight? Is he out of his mind?" Snape felt a surge of disbelief, his hands on his hips and his brow furrowed. "Perhaps this is the safety drill he mentioned," Dumbledore sighed. "I was also startled when I first saw the mark, but when I noticed other signs in the distance, I began to understand Anduin's intentions." "In the distance? What else is happening?" Snape asked, peering out the window. He had arrived in such a rush that he hadn't had time to assess the situation beyond the dark mark. As his eyes focused on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Snape's expression shifted from irritation to shock. From all directions around Hogwarts, dozens of wizards in black cloaks and Death Eater masks were advancing toward the castle, wands in hand. These figures exuded a chilling aura, their murderous intent palpable even from afar. "You call these wizards funny?" Snape's eyes widened, and he began to wonder if Dumbledore had lost his mind or had been placed under the Imperious Curse. "It seems you failed to see the essence of those black robes, Severus," Dumbledore said with a leisurely smile. "I will not interfere with this attack. This is the boy's way of warning me, and all I can do in response is trust him." Dumbledore sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Dumbledore's heart was heavy. He knew that Anduin had always disliked his tendency to overthink, and dealing with Quirrell was taking far too long. This elaborate display was Anduin's way of reminding him. Dumbledore wasn't entirely sure what Anduin intended to do today, and the exaggerated battle unfolding before him could easily spiral out of control, potentially causing chaos and injuries among the teachers and students. Initially, Dumbledore had agreed with Anduin that he would handle Quirrell while Anduin ensured the safety of Hogwarts, particularly Harry's. If Dumbledore intervened now, even without saying a word, his mere presence would signal to Anduin that he had overstepped his bounds. This would give Anduin the green light to confront Quirrell, thereby disrupting their plan. Dumbledore could only hope that Anduin was strong enough to manage the situation. Snape, standing nearby, glared angrily at the old headmaster. "Are you still the headmaster of Hogwarts? Even if Anduin is causing a commotion today, aren't you worried something might go wrong? Anduin isn't omniscient and could make mistakes. If any of those young wizards get hurt, will you take responsibility?" Dumbledore extended his hand through the window, pointing to a specific direction below. "Instead of scolding me, why don't you hurry down and help? That boy seems to be in imminent danger. Honestly, I don't know what these black-robed individuals are planning." Snape quickly scanned the area and saw 3 dark wizards dressed as Death Eaters ascending the steps of the dock cliff towards the castle. In a short while, they would encounter the first-year students from Gryffindor and Slytherin who were still discussing the Dark Mark outside the castle. "You." Snape shot Dumbledore a hard look before rushing out of the office. Despite his personal feelings towards the boy, he couldn't stand by when a student was in danger. He reacted immediately, driven by a sense of duty and urgency. End of this chapter. Chapter 679. The Chase. At this moment, all of Hogwarts had fallen into a strange atmosphere. The dark mark that appeared in the sky brought inexplicable panic to all the young wizards. However, many noticed that apart from this ominous emblem, nothing else seemed to be happening. So, Although the professors were constantly urging the students to rush to the Great Hall, many remained curiously observing the mark in the sky. This included Harry and his friends, as well as other students scattered throughout the castle. So, according to Malfoy, will there be murders after the dark mark appears? Harry asked his companions, puzzled. Who knows, but this mark alone is scary enough. Look at the snake protruding from the skull, it can still move, Ron commented with disgust, pointing to the sky. I always feel that this thing is not a good omen. Let's hurry back to the castle. The air here is almost suffocating me, Hermione said, brushing her hair back from the cold wind and urging the others. I agree. It's better not to stay here any longer. We can ask others what's going on when we get back. Neville nodded, feeling terrified as he looked at the huge skull. Okay, let's go, Harry said, not forgetting to call out to other young wizards of the same grade. However, just as they were about to move, Malfoy couldn't help but jump out and sneer. Look at how cowardly you are. Frightened by a dark mark? No wonder you always lose to us in training sessions. What are you daydreaming about? Ron retorted, refusing to be outdone. You're the ones who get beaten by Neville every time, yet you have the nerve to declare yourselves the winners? Apart from that brat, Neville, the rest of you are still defeated by us. So far, my record against you is still 3-2. Don't you forget? Malfoy said, glancing nervously at Neville before retorting stiffly. In truth, these confrontations were all quite even. In the tactical training class, except for Neville who could win decisively, they all had their share of victories and losses. But these young wizards loved to compete, often secretly recording their respective records to mock each other. Malfoy and Ron were old rivals, and Malfoy had been lucky enough to win a match against Ron. Why, do you want to face off with me again right now? None of us are wearing protective gear. Be careful, or you might end up bloody. Ron shot back. Just as Malfoy was about to retort, his eyes widened in fear as he looked behind Ron, as if seeing something terrifying. Don't try to deceive me again with that trick. I won't fall for it twice, Ron said, recalling how Malfoy had bluffed him in training before. He remained unmoved, continuing to stare at Malfoy. Help! Malfoy suddenly screamed in terror, abandoning the argument and running back in a panic. Seeing Malfoy's fierce reaction, Ron and the others realized he wasn't joking. They turned to look behind them, wanting to see what had frightened him so much. To their horror, just tens of meters away near the cliff steps, 3 men in black robes with skull masks were slowly approaching. Their cold eyes were fixed on the young wizards, and they walked towards the group with determination. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Ron and the others understood immediately. Someone was invading Hogwarts. What? The little wizards at the scene screamed in fear, and then followed Malfoy's lead, running in the opposite direction. Although they didn't know the intentions of the 3 adult wizards, their menacing outfits were enough to signal danger. It was clear at first glance that these were not good people, and it might be too late if they didn't run away now. What made the situation even more dire was that these little wizards had originally rushed from the greenhouse towards the main tower. However, the black wizards who had suddenly appeared were now blocking their way back to the castle. This forced them to retrace their steps, running along either a stone bridge or an outdoor path with few places to hide. The 3 CK wizards seemed to be attracted by the actions of the fleeing students and began to chase them. Their powerful strides made the ground tremble, and the little wizards could clearly feel the vibrations of the pursuing footsteps. Terrified, they pushed themselves to run faster than they ever had during morning exercises. Despite their efforts, the black wizards were not far behind, and the sound of their footsteps indicated that the gap between them was closing. Due to the varying physical abilities of the little wizards, the group that had initially fled together began to spread out into a line. At the forefront were Harry and Malfoy, who had joined the Tactics Club and were now far ahead of many others. After running for what felt like hundreds of miles, the 3 black wizards chasing them suddenly remembered they could cast spells. They raised their wands and ruthlessly targeted the stragglers. Ah! The shrill screams echoed in the cold wind, causing the little wizards ahead to tremble with fear. They couldn't help but look back and saw a chilling scene. The dark wizards were unleashing their magic, casting spells on the fleeing students. Some of the magic bullets were dodged by the lucky ones, but others hit their targets, sending the unfortunate wizards flying and crashing to the ground, their fates unknown. Around them, mud splashed from the impact of the spells. Faced with such interference, some little wizards gritted their teeth and charged forward, but many fell heavily due to fright or the chaos around them. Those who fell were quickly struck by the black wizard's spells and lost consciousness after a scream. "My God! Those wizards are killing everyone! We have to find a way to stop them, otherwise." Hermione's voice was choked with tears of fear and sadness as she watched her friends being slaughtered like lambs. "How should we stop them? Are you crazy? If we don't run faster, we'll die too," Malfoy shouted, thinking Hermione had lost her mind. It seemed impossible for first-year students to overcome such terrifying foes. "No, Hermione is right." Harry's voice was clear and determined despite the tense moment. "Those murderers are attacking the ones behind us now, but once they're done, they'll target us. We can't outrun their spells." "Then fight them. Can we not take down 3 dark wizards with so many of us?" Ron cursed angrily, but another scream and the sound of someone being knocked to the ground behind him felt like a bucket of cold water. He had no choice but to keep running. "Evil spirits. I don't think we have the slightest chance of winning against them," Malfoy muttered, knowing the grim reality of their situation. Harry might have been right, but the current situation seemed almost hopeless for them. "It's all your fault. If it wasn't for wasting time chattering, we would have returned to the main tower long ago." Ron snapped at Malfoy, not missing an opportunity to vent his frustration. "Now is not the time to argue. We need to run for our lives," Malfoy retorted, glaring at Ron with displeasure. "We don't need to outrun those dark wizards. We just need to be faster than the others." "How can you be so heartless? Are you just going to watch those dark wizards slaughter our companions?" Harry shot a dissatisfied glance at Malfoy. The occasional screams and the sound of heavy objects falling behind them felt like blows to his chest, each one more distressing than the last. "Then what do you suggest we do? Turn around and fight them?" "That's no different from committing suicide," Malfoy replied, his voice tinged with anxiety. Despite the horror of seeing his former classmates being slaughtered, he valued his own life too much to take such a risk. "Hermione, is there anything you can do? I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on for long. We're a few minutes away from the nearest greenhouse, but those dark wizards might catch up to us in a minute or two," Harry said, desperation creeping into his voice. He turned to Hermione, who was usually the most resourceful among them, hoping she had a solution. "Let's go over the self-defense spells we know first. I know the Obstacle Curse, Ignition Curse, Disarming Curse, and Stunning Curse," Hermione said after a moment of thought. She needed to assess their capabilities before coming up with a plan. "I only know 2 spells, the Leglocker Curse and the Tarantalegra spell, and those aren't even proper attack spells. They're more like pranks," Malfoy complained, starting to regret not learning more useful spells. "I know the Obstacle Charm. I only learned the Disarming Curse from you 2 days ago, Hermione, and I'm not sure if I can even use it properly," Harry admitted. "Then I'm in trouble. I don't even know how to block a spell," Ron said, his face contorted with worry. "Can't we use the Levitation Charm to fight? I'm really good at that one." End of this chapter. Chapter 680, Counterattack. Levitation Spell. Hermione's eyes lit up after Ron's reminder. "Yes, why can't we use the Levitation Charm to fight back?" "How do you plan to counterattack with the Levitation Charm? There are no controllable projectiles around, and using it directly on people is impractical. With our current skill level, it would only work on those who offer no resistance," Malfoy interjected, dousing Hermione's enthusiasm with a dose of reality. He was right. They were on the ring road next to Hogwarts Castle, surrounded by walls and open ground, with not even a stone in sight. "But we can use it on ourselves," Hermione exclaimed. "There's a corner 200 meters ahead. I can send some of you to the platform on the city wall." She turned to Neville. "If you get close to them, can you take one down?" "Me?" Neville hesitated, then steeled himself. "I can try. If I get close enough, maybe I can control one of them." Among the first years, Neville was known for his immediate combat prowess, though this was more due to their limited spellcasting abilities and focus on physical fitness and fighting in tactical training. In a brawl, these young wizards might actually fare better. That leaves two more, Hermione continued, her mind racing. Ron, Harry, I'll send you and Neville to the platform on the city wall to ambush them. Pansy, Daphne, Malfoy, and I will distract the dark wizards. Once you reach the ambush point, launch a surprise attack from above. Use the skills we learned in training to disarm them and knock their wands away if possible. Then we'll coordinate our attack. Harry was right. Those dark wizards are fast and will catch up with us eventually. Speaking while running was difficult, but Hermione forced herself to outline her plan clearly and calmly. I think it will work. Ron glanced back, seeing only a few fellow students behind him, and immediately agreed. In their current situation, there was no time to question the plan's reliability. Ron just wanted to end the chase quickly. Harry and Neville nodded in agreement, and after a quick glance at their pursuers, Malfoy, Parkinson, and Daphne reluctantly agreed. They had no other choice. The dark wizards were closing in. With the plan set, they sprang into action. They accelerated, putting some distance between themselves and the dark wizards. As they reached the corner, Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione slowed down and stopped, while Malfoy, Parkinson, and Daphne continued running for a bit longer before stopping about 30 meters away. Don't resist. My levitation charm can't control people who struggle, Hermione warned the others. She drew her wand and pointed it at them. Wingardium Leviosa. Under Hermione's skilled casting, Harry, Ron, and Neville were lifted high and landed on a platform more than 2 meters above the ground. The platform was more of a raised, decorative stone edge on the city wall. Once they stood on it, they had to press against the wall to avoid falling. The entire sole of the foot. But anyway, they finally landed successfully, and the screams from the other side of the corner had gradually become sparse, which meant that those dark wizards had already dealt with most of the people by this time. Possibly even everyone but them. After sending Neville and the others to the edge of the stage, Hermione hurried to Malfoy and the others, ready to look at the area around the corner. Now they could only do their best and catch those dark wizards by surprise. Malfoy, a little nervous, pulled out his wand and gestured to Hermione. Seeing the wand in Malfoy's hand, Hermione immediately understood his thoughts and returned a look of acceptance. As the dull footsteps of the 3 dark wizards got closer, everyone tightly gripped their wands and swallowed nervously. Soon, their eyes gradually became firm, as if at this moment they had all forgotten about life and death. Blow! Flying sand and stone! At the moment when the 3 dark wizards appeared, Malfoy and Hermione cast their spells almost simultaneously. Malfoy waved his wand heavily, and soon a whirlwind formed under the feet of the 3 dark wizards, quickly sweeping upwards. Hermione cast the spell Flying Sand and Moving Stones, summoning a large amount of sand and stones to entangle the 3 of them. The combination of the sand and stones with the newly formed whirlwind produced a lot of power, crackling and hitting the bodies and masks of the dark wizards. The dense sand and stones seemed to obscure their vision for a while. Go! Seeing the effect of Hermione and Malfoy's offensive, Neville immediately shouted and then jumped up first, kicking the dark wizard farthest from the wall. There was no other way. The one at the top was the most skilled among the 3. Since he had decided to pester the other, he naturally had to deal with the furthest and most difficult one. Even if the other 2 jumped down, they probably wouldn't be able to reach that person. At this time, Ron and Harry also shouted to encourage themselves and jumped down from above. Ron jumped on a dark wizard first, strangling the opponent's neck with his left arm, while his right arm held the wand to the enemy, preparing to restrict the opponent's spellcasting. Harry's choice was almost exactly the same, using a locking technique similar to the guillotine. However, the surprise effect of the 3 of them was not as good as they had imagined. Neville, who took the lead in the charge, used all his strength to fly out and hit the dark wizard's head with a kick, but it only made him stagger. Ron and Harry, who used the guillotine against the dark wizard, felt as if they were strangling a solid metal pipe. They had already used all their strength, but the other party didn't even lean back a little bit. Feeling the strange touch from the soles of their feet and their hands, Harry, Neville, and Ron instantly turned pale with shock. "No, these guys are not human!" Neville shouted hysterically towards the others in the distance. Hermione and the others were full of confusion when they heard Neville's words. What was the situation? Their raid plan had been successfully completed, so why was Neville still shouting? But now, they didn't have time to think about the meaning of Neville's words. The four little wizards on the opposite side attacked the dark wizards at the same time. "Stop, stiff legs! There are many obstacles. Burning flames. Expelliarmus." Malfoy and the others cast their best offensive spells one after another, quickly attacking the three dark wizards. Among them, Malfoy's leg-locking spell was the fastest and most accurate. He was the first to learn this spell after he got the wand. Although he initially used it as a prank spell, he had now mastered it for serious combat. The dark wizard, whose neck was locked by Ron, responded with arrogant confidence. He swiftly raised his left hand, reached back, and grabbed Ron's neck. With a powerful motion, he hurled Ron forward. Ron flew through the air with a swish and was struck by the leg-locking curse. However, before he could even feel his legs lock, he was knocked unconscious. On the other side, a staggering dark wizard, kicked by Neville, became the focus of the four people facing him. Daphne and Pansy Parkinson cast obstructing and disarming curses at him. Despite being off balance from Neville's kick, the dark wizard managed to cast an iron armor curse silently, blocking their attacks. He even had time to counterattack Daphne and Pansy. The two girls from Slytherin instinctively dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the spells. Seeing his spells miss, the dark wizard prepared to press his advantage. But Neville, who had landed nearby, delivered a high kick to the wizard's neck. The kick was powerful and precise, but Neville felt as if he had struck an iron pillar. His right calf went numb instantly. Despite the pain, Neville's attack drew the dark wizard's ire. The wizard turned and delivered a sidekick in return. Neville, unable to dodge due to his injured leg, took the full force of the kick to his lower abdomen, sending him flying several meters away. As he lost consciousness, Neville wondered why this dark wizard was so skilled in melee combat. The moves seemed so familiar. Could it be? Before Neville could finish his thought, he blacked out. Meanwhile, the dark wizard targeted by Hermione's flame spell attempted to mimic his companion's move. He grabbed Harry by the collar, intending to throw him into the approaching flames. End of this chapter.